2024. This is our first regular council meeting of the year outside of our strategic planning meeting. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that the town of Comox is standing on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation people. Sorry about that feedback. So we have adoption of the agenda this evening from, it actually should be January 24th, 2024, the regular council meeting be adopted, and a seconder. All those in favor? And that's approved. Thank you. So we have two delegations this evening. First, we have Dana and Karen with the Comox Valley Situation Table to give a delegation about the newly formed Situation Table. So welcome to Dana, and you'll have approximately 10 minutes with questions after. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. I'm looking forward to telling you a little bit about a new initiative and resource in our community called the Situation Table. My name is Dana Forsgren, and I'm coordinating the Comox Valley Situation Table. During my presentation today, I'll be covering what a situation table is, the different roles on the situation table, how tables are structured across the province. I'll share some of the notable trends in data and the benefits that we've experienced over the last 7 months. And I'll also leave council with a few considerations. The situation table is supported by and often brought to communities by the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General. It is a part of our province's community safety plan. It is not a new model. It has been in Canada for nearly 15 years, and it is used in multiple provinces. In BC, there are 33 active tables, and about a dozen more are being mobilized. On Vancouver Island, there's a table in Victoria, Cowichan Valley, Nanaimo, Campbell River, and Port Hardy. So what is the situation table? It is not an organization. It is a meeting space to collaborate and communicate more effectively between public safety, the health authority, Indigenous support services, and support services to rapidly support community members who are experiencing high risk, near to crisis or severe harm. This next slide is a visual of some of the impacts that one community member may experience at one point in time. And this is a visual of a community member we did support at the situation table. Seeing these risk factors in someone's life, you can imagine how challenging it would be for one person to navigate so many different types of services and sectors and systems to regain some stability in their life again. At the situation table, we are typically supporting situations that are experiencing 6 or more risk factors at one time. On the right of this slide, you see a term, acutely elevated risk. And this is what situations must meet. There's a threshold of risk we are looking for to be accepted at the table. And this is looking through 4 factors: that situations have a significant interest at stake, there's reasonable belief that harm will occur if no intervention is provided, that the anticipated harm is significant or severe, and that the risks are multidisciplinary, covering over multiple different systems and sectors. This next slide will show you our main partners at the situation table. And these primary partners are those agencies whose services are very well aligned with the situation table. They're already supporting people at very high risk in our community. These agencies listed here are those agencies coming to the table on a biweekly basis and consistently. We also have secondary partners at the situation table, and this is a multitude of other types of agencies that will use the situation table on an as-needed basis. So they may use the situation table as a resource to present situations of high risk, or we may ask those agencies to collaborate with us if there's a situation that may need their support. And some examples here are the Senior Support Society, the CV Emergency Management Services, and Comox First Nation. We also have a systems leaders group, and this is made up of the senior managers within the agencies that are at the table already. It is often also including city representatives such as social planners or representatives of community safety for cities as well. These are those leaders that are providing oversight to the coordinator and to the chair, but more importantly, they are reviewing the risks and the data that we are collecting and helping us to determine next steps in addressing the gaps in services in our community. This chart is showing you how tables are managed across the province. And you can see that the majority of the tables are managed by municipalities and cities. We have some that are managed by RCMP, and there are some that are managed by MCFD and by the Health Authority. This chart is an important chart to bring forward because that relationship with the municipality is vital for the ongoing success and sustainability of the situation table. It encourages commitment from our community, but it also acts as a very effective way to share these information about risk factors that are being presented. Slide, please. I will share a little bit now of the data we've collected so far. On the left, you'll see some of those top emerging agencies that are referring situations to the table. Many of those top agencies are providing services in emergent situations, such as RCMP, Courtney Bylaw, and CV Emergency Management. And the table really acts as a way for these services to facilitate communication with next steps for support for these individuals who are at very high risk. You can also see Whitshea Friendship Center is a top referrer, but on the right, they are also a top collaborator and an agency that is often involved in collaborative support planning. So on the right, there is a list of those agencies heavily involved in collaborative planning, and that includes VIHA, Mental Health Substance Use, Whitshea, Courtney Bylaw, Dawn-to-Dawn Action on Homelessness, and Income Assistance. And this is an important list to see because these situations are very complex. And so when we are coming to sit down and discuss these very complex situations, we have a variety of different sectors bringing resources and professional experience and support to those situations. This slide is a chart of the most common risks presented in our community. And we can see some very familiar and persistent risk factors such as poverty, housing, substance misuse, and mental health. But we're also noticing some other notable trends in our community, such as physical health concerns, crime victimization, unemployment, and criminal involvement. At the situation table, we are keeping track of over 100 different risk factors in our community. These are preventative risk factors prior to crisis taking place. Most importantly, though, again, this is really demonstrating that the situations coming forward are very complex, and that really underscores why a collaborative effort is so important to properly support these individuals. The Comox Valley Situation Table started only 7 months ago. We are meeting consistently and regularly. We are building excellent partnerships. Some of the benefits that have been shared with us so far are that because we are all meeting these high-risk situations, these individuals are becoming more aware of a multitude of other resources that only one service provider would not have been able to offer. We are also ensuring that sectors that are not typically communicating, that are not overlapping in the community are now communicating about these gaps in social services and about the system issues that we're all experiencing as well. We're also creating a unique set of de-identified data that is looking at the preventative risk factors that will help support our community before crisis and severe harm occurs. I would like to leave council with one consideration, that we have a city representative on our systems leaders group, and we do believe that this would be an important piece of communication regarding the severe risks that we are all experiencing in our community, and how to take steps forward to address those gaps. Thank you very much for having me here today. I really appreciate your time and consideration.
Thanks, Dana. So we're just going to go to questions now. Just a quick question. How long is the funding available for the partnership with the nonprofit that's managing it, the Restorative Justice Center? Is it a 2-year partnership, or is it unknown how long the funding will go on for?
The funding is available for 1 more year until the end of 2024. Mm-hmm.
So basically this calendar year.
The funding, and so just to clarify, there is the Restorative Justice Center is also participating separately as well, and they have added their own support to the table through facilitation and meeting space. But for the coordinator role, that is funded for 1 more year. Mm-hmm. Just to be clear. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's through the Ministry of Public Safety.
Thank you for that. Other questions from council? Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Dana. I noticed in the presentation you requested for a city representative or town representative, and then your delegation kind of submission was for a council member to participate. I'm just wondering what other municipalities have done, what other situation tables have done. Would it be more effective to have a council member or a staff member from town who might be more connected to the inner workings and resources available to the town?
Yeah, and very good question. And this is something that I think upon conversation with other situation tables, that I think more effectively, it is often someone who's involved with social planning or a part of community safety in some way. And that seems to be a really good partnership with the situation table leadership group.
Thanks for that clarification. Councillor Mayer.
Thank you so much for your presentation and for your great work. Can you tell us a little bit more about, you kind of talked about how you are collecting all these preventative risk factors. Tell us what's happening with that and how that might inform us getting a bit more out in front of this. I'm really struck by how many resources are going into supporting folks and really get how preventative measures would be much more effective.
So we are collecting de-identified data when we sit down at the table and as a situation is presented. And are you asking about how we are sharing data in particular? Because this data can be available for any agency to use to kind of advocate for more support, but it is available, it's available to cities and to the agencies sitting at the table as well.
I'm thinking more about the systems change lens, and if there's somebody who is part of that table who is taking that view, making policy recommendations, looking at the way the system is functioning, understanding there's a lot of people working on health reform.
Yes, so, and that is another piece of it. So alongside the data, we're collecting the de-identified data about the risks. We are opening up the group to presenting system issues. And so there is a way for any agency coming to the table to present system issues that they're experiencing and have a discussion with the table partners. This information can then go to the system leaders. That would also include some of the solutions because a lot of this table is made up of professionals from different sectors who are often frontline and experiencing the work firsthand. So there's solutions that can be presented to the systems leaders who can then look at that information and those system issues and then make some other kind of recommendations about that as well. Yeah.
That's great. And then thank you. My other question is, can you just talk a little bit more about the connection with restorative justice and with emergency management?
Definitely. So my main partner is Karen McKinnon, who is the directing manager of Restorative Justice. And that partnership has been excellent. It is through Karen's experience as a facilitator that it's really created a great strength at the table, bringing that group together and providing space, but also providing a great deal of information about restorative justice and about social equity, about community-based training that other partners can be involved in. We are also regularly in conversation with CV Emergency Management, who has presented quite a few situations to the table, and they do attend regularly as well. Although they're a secondary partner, because they've found themselves having to refer quite a few situations, they have come more regularly, and they're also able to inform and discuss other types of emergencies that might take place, such as inclement weather that is going to impact our vulnerable populations, and having those conversations at the table to prepare for those situations.
That's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Other questions from around the table? Just a really quick question on those 8 risk factors. What would physical health, which was kind of like in the top 3, entail? That was the only one that I kind of didn't quite understand.
Yeah, and I can send this out to counselors. We have a package that looks at the risk factors that we're tracking. And so physical health concerns can actually break down into probably 6 other categories. And really it's looking at, it could really be ongoing physical health concerns, like physical health concerns that are impacting mobility, but it could be ongoing health issues needing regular care in a hospital. It really could be a variety of things that are presenting in someone's life that is creating a barrier to them participating in employment or being able to access resources. So often these risk factors that I'm showing you in those visuals, they can break down into a variety of other more detailed risks that people are experiencing, because there's, again, over 100 risk factors that we are tracking, and our community has even come up with their own risk factors that they've noticed, and some include elder neglect and elder abuse have been some that have been added, and hoarding. So these are ones that have been persistent in our community as well.
Thanks for those examples.
Yeah.
And it looks like that is all the questions from council. So thank you so much, Dana and Karen, for coming. And because there is a request kind of at the end of the delegation, that will be on our next council meeting for follow-up and discussion, and we would be in touch after that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care.
So our next delegation is Raymond and Susan from D'Astaire Senior Center Association. So I will just have you come up, and you're welcome to either sit or stand for your delegation. And we are familiar with this request, but of course you'll have 10 minutes for the floor. And you're ready to go. Thank you, Raymond.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Minions and councillors. My name is Raymond Morin, and I'm currently the president of the D'Astaire Seniors Center Association. We want to thank our mayor and councillors for visiting us in December. We gave you a tour of our center, and we had a chance to chat. We also gave you a package of information at that time on what we do, and well, you're quite familiar with what we do, but basically the highlights of our achievements in the past year and in the past years. And we left you with a little package of information at that point in time. We also, in addition to the briefing notes that you got in December, we prepared about a 4-page summary of tonight's meeting. And I won't go over those details because they're basically in the report. But the important thing to look at is the comparison that we did against 4 other nonprofit organizations in the Valley. And that was in preparation, of course, for our request of tonight. And tonight's request is for tax-based funding in the amount of $60,000 in the coming year to fund an executive director position in our center. Why are we turning to the town for this type of request? It's because most granting organizations, pretty well all granting organizations, with the exception of BC Gaming, shy away from funding, operating costs or operating revenue. And we are receiving a grant from BC Gaming that we have to reapply for each year. But it's a fairly small amount. It represents about 4% of our revenue budget. And we have to reapply for that grant each year. So, and grant applications are laborious and time consuming. And they have a tendency to basically almost try and lead the organization to fit their priorities and parameters. So, and they also have different calendar years on the grants. For instance, we get a grant from New Horizon for Seniors, which is a federal grant, and their grant runs from April 1st to March 31st each year. BC Gaming and the others are basically using a calendar year. So we have to play around with that, but we're grateful to get the grants. The other thing we're very grateful for is the support that we've received from the town over the past 48 years. The town has been a strategic partner for us throughout those years. And we're grateful for the wonderful building that you supply, the maintenance that you do on that building, and the services that you pay for. We have a wonderful relationship with the town staff, and that's greatly appreciated. Now, the town is our strategic partner, and they've been our strategic partner all along. And that's what kept us going. And in 2 years from now, we'll be celebrating our Golden Jubilee for 50 years of operation. So that's quite an achievement, because we started out in 1975 with 10 members. Today, we've reached 1,200 members. 850 of those members are town people. They live in Comox. The remainder, of course, are from Courtenay, Regional District, and a few from Cumberland. Now, there is a saying that is pertinent to our situation, and that is, good highways attract traffic. And while we're in that situation, our reputation has outdistanced our capacity to manage the demand in the center from 1,200 members. And this operating model is really not sustainable without an executive director. There, in our benchmarking study, out of 5 basically organizations that we studied, including ourselves, of course, the 4 other organizations have an executive director in place. Now, so at times we seem to be in a very much in a reactive mode. See problem, fix problem, next problem. And we'd like to move away from that or move forward. Now, as strategic partners, we naturally have an interest in the town's strategic plan, your 2022, 2026 strategic plan. And your strategic plan resonates with us, and we see ways that our center can play a role in the success of your plan. For instance, strategic priorities. Priority number 1, organizational excellence. This is one of our priorities as well. Our overworked board strives for excellence as well, in spite of our management challenges. We just completed a member survey in August, and we do have, according to our members, organizational excellence. 91% of our members responded that they were generally satisfied or very satisfied with our management of the center. Priority number 2, community connection and wellness, recreation. I quote from your plan. We believe that recreation, excuse me, we believe that recreation is critical to community vibrancy, belonging, connection, and health at all ages. The center's contribution, of course, our core business is recreation for centers, for seniors. Third priority, economic health, downtown vitality. Every week, we have approximately 1,000 seniors walking through our center's doors. That's 50,000 visits a year to downtown Comox to take in our programs, to shop, and do business downtown. Number 4, good governance and community participation. I quote from your plan. We enhance two-way communications with our community. Well, Councillor Chris Haslett on our board checks that box off. We also have a great relationship with all the town employees that we deal with. Decision-making, this is the key one. I quote, we make evidence-based decisions focused on the best interests of the town over the long term. This one also resonates with us, which is why we undertook a benchmarking study, and provided council members with its highlights. I can provide the entire report to your CAO, Jordan. It's a 20-page document, so I did not want to include it in your briefing package. So the benchmarking study compared our business model to 4 nonprofit organizations in the Valley using 25 different metrics. That's 125 data points. The main takeaway from that study is that all 4 organizations that we compared ourselves to have an executive director in place. Unlike Evergreen Seniors Club, our closest comparable, managed by Comox Recreation Association, Courtney Recreation Association. We don't have a city or town department managing our human resources, payroll, IT support, budgeting, finance management, rentals, janitorial services, running a cafeteria, insurance policies, etc., etc., etc. We handle all those services in-house, as highlighted in the benchmarking study. Now, by in-house, we mean that it's managed by the board of directors who chair committees and look after the day-to-day operations. In other words, we're management and staff rolled into one. We're rowing and steering at the same time, mostly rowing. According to the latest member survey, 75% of our members fall in the 70 to 89 years of age demographics. That's the volunteer pool that we draw from. What we do have, though, is the determination to see the Comox Senior Center continue to grow and thrive for another 50 years. Not that we'll be around to see it, but with an ED in place, with an executive director in place, one of our top priorities will be to diversify our funding sources. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit in the area of plan giving, bequests, business sponsorships that could be harvested. And basically, we have a captive audience in our age group that we can build a plan to diversify our funding. And I think that is the direction that we're going to go into, so that we don't have to go cap in hand every year to granting organizations who basically take over the organization and tell us how to run it. So several years ago, we received a letter of support from the town of Comox regarding a BC gaming grant. The closing paragraph in that letter read as follows. The D'Astaire Senior Center is an integral part of our community and an important factor contributing to our citizens' quality of life. We greatly appreciate the dedicated work of this group, and we hope that you will look favorably on their funding request. When that letter was written, we were in the depth of COVID-19 and had 650 members. Today, we have 1,200 members. By the way, we did get that grant. So the $64 million question is, if the Comox Senior Center did not exist to provide recreational and social services to seniors in the community, who would do that job? Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Raymond. We're very proud of our 48-year partnership with D'Astaire, and I know you do a lot of volunteer hours there, so thank you to you and all the volunteers. It's quite incredible what you guys do on $260,000 budget every year, so thank you for that. And your very detailed package was helpful. So questions from council for Raymond? Councillor Swift.
Thank you for your presentation and also for the tour before Christmas. That was great. I'm just wondering what your a job description for an ED would be for you, and how many hours per week would you see it being?
Yeah, we're looking at about between 28 and 30 hours a week. We already have a job description, and that job description was modeled after other organizations that are involved in managing a senior center. So we have a job description ready to go. Depends on funding.
We'll go to Councillor Haslett online and then Councillor Mayor. Councillor Haslett.
Thank you. In the last year and a half, I've had a really great opportunity to work with the D'Astaire Center and Raymond and Susan, as well as the other directors. They're providing a really, really great service to a lot of members of the community, especially a big member or a big group of our community that's directly in Comox. I'm in strong support of their request here tonight. I recognize that the contributions that they're making are very strong, go a long, long way, and also align with quite a few of the values that we put in our place, or that we put into place for our strategic planning. It's easy to see the amount of work that the board of directors has taken on, many of them sitting on multiple committees, as well as doing everything they can to promote a volunteer base within the organization. So knowing that they're coming looking for money, it's the last effort. They've done quite a lot of work to get them to here, and I think it's an incredibly impressive amount of members that they have from the community that are showing up weekly and annually, and I really applaud them for the work that they're doing.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett. And just a note of process, we would be looking at this on February 7th at our next regular council meeting after the delegation, unless council makes a different unanimous decision on that. Councillor Mayor.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for the tour as well. I have to say it's really astonishing what you and all of the volunteers have built and what you're able to do with volunteers. I hope you're all very proud. I'm curious, in your member survey, did you ask if people would be willing to pay a little bit more for the membership fees,
No,
and what
We
kind
did
of
not, but
elasticity?
we're looking at
Yeah.
increasing the membership fee this summer.
What's your sense of how much would be acceptable for folks?
I haven't consulted with the board on that yet, but I would suggest that we could probably go an extra $5 per member per year.
Yeah.
That would bring in about $5,000 extra.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Thank you. And then what do you think is lost? That the Evergreen Club has a different operating model,
Yes.
right? And I'm curious about what you think would be lost by moving to a model like that. And I'm not suggesting that that's desirable. I just am curious about what you think.
It's a possible model, but it would take a lot of effort and time to transition into that model. In the interim, I think the least expensive solution is basically funding an executive director position, and then basically improving the efficiency of the organization. Like all our record management, all our class registrations, all our membership registration, it's all done on paper. It's paper, and then somebody types it into the database. And we're not in a position of receiving membership applications online. And as such, we've had 1,200 visits to the office window in order to fill out a paper form, and then somebody else takes it to the computer and enters it. There's got to, I mean, but we want to do all those things, but we don't have the internal management capacity to do it right now, because basically we're just treading water and basically not disrupting the system too much, just keep going. But there's so many improvements that need to be done. We need to digitize all our record management. Those are projects, and we can probably get funding for those projects. Project funding is fairly easy to get. You see, funding organization will fund projects, and they'll fund capital assets, equipment. They just want basically to fund year by year by year. And that's fine. We're using those grants. Actually, our second source of revenue right now are grants. But we have to, somebody's got to manage those projects. And if you're busy, you're busy keeping your head above water, you can't take on those type of projects because they'd be too disruptive.
Yeah, 100% get it. I think lots of folks here have experience in the nonprofit sector and understand the challenge that you're talking about. So kudos again to you and all the volunteers for the great work, and thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Blacklock, did you have your hand in the queue?
Yeah, thank you.
And then
Thank
Councillor
you.
Kerr.
And thank you for coming to see us. My question goes along with Jen's question in that, you know, you're talking about a $5 increase to your annual dues, and your annual dues are currently $35 a
$35,
year,
yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
So $50 more per year would be $60,000 at 1,200 members. So $85 a year. We're still talking about a pretty low amount of money for the value you return for your membership. And I question whether we should be your first port of call in looking for the $60,000. Because like my dad used to say to me, he who pays the piper calls the tune. And you'd be losing a lot of control if the town came in and hired our own person from our recreation department as your executive director. So I don't think that's the way you want to go.
No, that's
You
not.
want the $60,000, no strings attached, to be able to continue to run in the great fashion that you always have.
That's correct.
And I see the burnout in your board, right? You probably got, like most nonprofits and most societies in our town, you'll have a hardcore group of board members and volunteers that, you know, you probably have 20 or 30 that do everything. And I know that can be frustrating. It's a lot of money for the town when you're talking about 800 of your members live in the town of Comox. So do you want to pay the $50 a year to the senior society, or do you want to pay it $50 extra on your tax bills? Like, that's kind of where we're at here.
Mhm.
So you're telling us you'd rather see it on your tax bills and not on your membership dues, correct?
Well, it's not a binary response to that. Basically, it could be a bit of both.
Yeah.
You know, but we also want to make the access to the center affordable to all the center, to all the seniors. So there's probably room to notch it up a bit more, but I think that there'd be a choke point at one point if we went to much higher than $45 a year.
$10 a month would be too much.
We could look at that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Councillor Kerr.
Just a question for staff related to MLA Leonard's letter of support for this. She mentioned the Stream 1 and 2 of the Age Friendly Communities Program. So I guess the town received just over 20,000 for Stream 1. Just curious where that was allocated, if that was one time or annual funding. And then she mentions Stream 2, and she would support the town's application for Stream 2 funding. And again, I'm wondering if that would be one-time funding or annual funding, and if it was annual funding, if it could be used for supporting an executive director. Thanks.
Over to CAO Wall.
Thank you. The Stream 1 and Stream 2 are one-time grants, and the Stream 1 was a partnership, I believe it was with the Healthy Community Society, to undertake an age-related grant and study, which is already underway, so it's not unallocated funds, and the town basically has operated as a flow-through for that, and I would imagine Stream 2 is meant to be to implement any sort of recommendations or conclusions coming out of that report, and we would again act as a flow-through, so it wouldn't be unallocated funds and it would be a one-time.
Just a question, and I don't have the HR kind of chart for the organization. Is there any possibility if the executive director position came to fruition for those 30 hours that one of the 4 part-time positions would one of those possibly, like the coordinator, get taken into that? Like, is there part of the budget that would possibly get taken over by the executive director role to kind of diminish 60,000 versus say another amount?
Yeah.
Be more palpable.
Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that for sure. Yes, because all our employees right now are on a part-time basis. And if we get an executive director, of course, we'll have to adjust on that. And yeah, we need to look at that. I think it would have an impact on the hours that the existing part-time employees are receiving, for sure. Yeah, we'd have to make an adjustment there. And that would give us a bit more budget wiggle room then. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Lots of moving parts. I think the need for the position has been made quite clear with knowing the organization that there needs to be an executive director. So thank you for expressing that. We will be discussing this at our next meeting on February 7th and then be in contact. Was there any other questions from council for Raymond while we have him here? Thank you very much, and we will be in touch.
Thank you very much.
So we'll just take about a 30-second intermission if anyone would like to depart before our meeting. We're going to get started again, everyone, since we're still near the beginning. Okay, so we're moving on to adoption of the meeting minutes on page 21. If I can get a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from the regular council meeting of December 6th, 2023 to be adopted.
Second.
All those in favor? Oh, sorry, questions on questions.
Yes, sorry, there is a correction to make on page 25. And it is with regards to the motion for the warming and cooling center. And I'm sorry, I didn't have time to go back to the recording to get the wording exactly. But it should read something like designating the Comox Marina Sail building as the preferred location and the community center as the secondary location at staff's discretion.
That's correct. So just over to administration. Do we need to repass the motion, or if it's a clarification on the second location was a part of the conversation? And I do recall that also, yes.
We can make an amendment to the minutes, and then we'll just take a look at the policy to make sure it reflects what's been noted here.
Okay. So again, it was just the addition of the secondary location at the discretion of staff for the warming and cooling centers. And all other items the same on that. So we'll get if there's no other comments on that, a motion to approve as amended. Moved. And seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We have the special council meeting minutes for December 13th, 2023 to be adopted. Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on that? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Council committee meeting minutes and reports. We have the Strategic Planning Committee meeting minutes from December 13th, 2023 to be received. Motion. Thank you. That's moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We have the Strategic Planning Committee meeting minutes for January 10th, 2024 to be received. Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We have a committee recommendation from that same meeting for the budget timeline policy. We have a committee recommendation that the council budget timeline policy CCL-066 be amended to move the operating budget decisions to coincide with the capital and special projects decisions. That's moved. And a seconder? Seconded. Any questions or comments on that budget timeline policy? Perfect. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you for that. We're moving on to the consent agenda. If I can get a motion to move A through S together, and then we will see if there's any individual items to be brought out. Moved and seconded. And all those in favor of receiving? Opposed? Those are all received. Thank you. Items to be brought out individually, and we just need to have a seconder before we have discussion on any of the items. Councillor Mayer.
Item G from the Food Policy Council.
Perfect, and that's on 1966 Guthrie application. I will second that. So open for discussion.
Great, thank you. It was great to see this go to the Food Policy Council, and I found the recommendations to be really helpful and interesting. I am wondering if staff could let us know what happens next.
I'll turn that over to Director Commenz.
That would be contained in the next report to council on the application, and we are also anticipating comments from CVRD Agriculture.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I had that item also. So just to, when are we expecting a report back on 1966, Guthrie, over to CAO Wall or through to Director Commends? What's the timeline for that current application for a report to council?
I believe we're still waiting outstanding information from the applicant.
Thank you for that. Other items to be pulled. Councillor Kerr.
I guess items B and L also pertains to a few others, but start with those two.
Okay, so that's on the automated carts and the organic. And did you want to pull kind of all automated
Sure,
collection?
yes.
We can just note all automated collection /
Which is most of them.
it's half of them. And second, so we're open for discussion. Thanks, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question really for staff. I mean, we have lots of feedback in my neighborhood, I'm sure in all of your neighborhoods, on the street, from letters, emails, et cetera. So it's great. And I also want to, commend the members of the public who've sent a lot of constructive feedback as well. Like, hey, I know you're working hard, staff's working hard, but here's some ideas. So that's been really helpful. Just question for staff, how's it going so far? We're a couple of weeks into it. Like, what have been the successes? My OCD tendencies really like all the very uniform looking bins as I drive down the road. So that's been nice. It's satisfied some personal needs of mine, but also like what are the challenges, what challenges have there been and how staff has worked to address them? Specifically two that I've seen some of the trucks not actually have the automated tippers. So the workers actually have to lift the heavy bins in themselves. So I'm wondering, is there like a backlog on the actual automated trucks or when that might be fixed? And then secondly, lots of questions still coming our way about when can residents pick up a second organic bin, purchase that service, and or switch the size of the bin. So just curious about the timing so I know how to respond to residents that are asking. Thanks.
Thanks for summarizing those letters. So over to CAO Wall with those two questions.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll start with the overall rollout. I think has gone really well. I think when you take a look, we've certainly had some concerns come in. We've certainly had some complaints, but we also need to understand that we are making a service delivery change for 15,000 people. And I think the level and number of complaints we got in was relatively small. And most of the people we were talking to were seeking clarification on how to properly comply. So that's gone well. We are noticing some levels of non-compliance with people putting items in the wrong bins, overflowing, putting them in the wrong spot, but those are going to get resolved over time. And that actually leads into one of the other questions, which is why do we have some vehicles that don't have the arms on them to be able to pick up? And we were going to have, I believe it's the second all-electric garbage fleet in Canada. And that was looking really, really good. And then about 3 months before rollout, there was a recall on the chassis that hold the battery. So they're figuring those out. Once those get fixed, we'll get the new trucks in. And when the new trucks come in, they'll all have the automated arm. They'll also have cameras on them, which will allow us to track and see who's putting, who's putting things in the wrong bins. And what it'll do is it takes a quick picture. It lets us know what locations it's at. We can send that to the resident and let them know that they need to make sure that they're putting things in the right spot. You may have seen correspondence come in from the Comox Valley Regional District with the amount of things in the organics that's not supposed to be in the organics. It's very expensive to deal with that at the end. And if we can get those items cleaned up, it's just going to reduce the overall operating costs for everybody moving forward. So that'll be really good news. As far as changing the size of your bins, 6 months after rollout, so I think we're about a month in, so it'll be 5 months from now. We're going to have some internal discussions on the purchase of second bins, because we do understand that if we do have it in the bylaw that allows the purchase of the second bins, and if you're producing a level of organics in the winter, for example, that needs to be taken care of that way, I think we will be able to maybe deal with that a little bit sooner. We are encouraging everybody to try and see what they can do to fit within the limits that are provided. Some of the writing that we're getting in is that, people have got a family and they're producing more garbage. I can say, there's a number of people on our staff that have large families. I have 5 people in my home. our public works or director now, so our director of engineering, he's got 7 people in his home. It certainly has been changes to my behavior, and talking with him, it's the same thing. Things that we might have been too lazy to clean and put in the recycling, it needs to be cleaned and put in the recycling. Your overwraps, I know we don't do overwrap pickup in the town, but we have the recycling depot in Courtney. The overwraps need to go in the overwraps. And once you do that, I think you can find that it is a manageable thing to do, even in large families, to meet the size constraints that we have. And that is the point of the size constraints, is that you need to be doing very good job on your recycling if you're going to be able to stay within those limits. So we hope that over time people will be able to change their behaviors and will be able to keep things out of the landfill. Organics and recycling are a different story though, and we're looking to see if we can maybe speed up the timeline for where people can access secondary carts there.
Just quick follow-up. Thank you for that answer, CAO. That's fantastic. I think that is a good point about the diversion, and from the Waste Management Board, that diversion piece is so important of keeping the garbage out of the landfill and keeping stuff like organics out of the landfill as well. And just as I think that's really encouraging to hear, maybe speeding up the 6-month process, especially as the spring cleanups in gardens and backyards start happening. So I think that would be welcome news for the residents. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. We have Councillor Grant.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, if you came to exchange your bin, is there going to be a cost for that?
If I recall correctly, there is an exchange fee, and it's $25 or $35. It's a $35 exchange fee.
We might want to make that part of our advertising, just so
Yeah.
so people don't get surprised. And I also noticed that Steve, who's in the audience here, asked us about what we do with the old bins, like we have down here. My understanding is they get recycled. They go to recycling and
Correct.
get work down there. So I guess when I'm looking at this, when we get these letters, do we respond to each of these people?
We are giving, I think for a lot of the garbage, it's a lot of form letters going out. I don't know if they're addressing each and every person's individual concerns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
And that's just the sheer volume that we've gotten in, which we had expected.
Yeah.
Our administration does provide a letter for each of these, and sometimes they're very similar if it addresses the same, but people do get responses. It just takes the 2 to 6 weeks, depending on how big it is, to get a response. There's not a no response to them. I'd like to pull out I for Pat Carl for Comox Valley Electric Vehicle Association, if I have a seconder. Thank you. Just wanted to check on the timeline with staff on when we would be looking at kind of putting together like an amenities request over to some of the big developments that are coming. It seems like we've kind of seen 10% of electric charging stations, but as it comes that there's more and more electric vehicle sales, and we may not have our OCP before a couple of these large projects. How do we kind of discuss at the council table or stress that, having the conduits there in advance, not necessarily the actual charging infrastructure, but the back end of the electric kind of there for 50 to 100%, for more of the parking stalls than the 10% we had required 5 years ago, say. So just kind of wondering when the timing for those bylaws does make the most sense to not miss some of the larger buildings that are coming. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. We are already having those conversations with the developers to let them know that we are going to be looking for higher levels of charging. These projects that are going through rezone will come to the council table for your guys' consideration. At that time, you also have the ability to say you would like to see those percentages increased if what you find in front of you isn't satisfactory. And then, as you mentioned, with the changes coming in from the provincial government legislation, the OCP that we need to do, and then we'll also be updating our subdivision and servicing bylaw through this process. Council will have a number of opportunities to put those things into your policies and regulations for permanently moving forward, rather than what we have right now, which is negotiated through rezone.
Okay. So just to clarify, 2024 would kind of be negotiating with individual projects, and by sometime in 2025, that will be kind of baked into the process through the OCP or the subdivision bylaws.
Correct.
Thank you for that update. Councillor Mayer.
Sorry, I had a couple more I wanted to discuss.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah.
I just wanted to pull out the housing related ones. So that kind of N, O, and S.
I'll
And
just get a seconder for that.
thank you.
I'll second that. And for discussion?
So for N, I was looking for an update on the regional kind of task force that was looking for, I think, a shelter space. And for O, I wanted to ask staff if we had a sense of the impact for our community with Airbnb. And then on the housing summit, I just wanted to understand our process for deciding who is going to go or who's attending virtually.
Just to clarify, that was N, O, and S that were pulled there?
If I wrote down the letters correctly, that should be, yeah,
Okay, perfect.
thank you.
I'll just quickly address on the housing task force that Chief of the Comox First Nation and the different municipality leaders sat on. That was started in about October, and the goal of that task force was to try to lease space for 4 to 5 months in the winter months to have a kind of longer term winter shelter and not just one that opened when it hit the -4 threshold. We basically sat and called at every single meeting, every leasehold available, every empty building. We looked at different city buildings that could possibly be retrofitted, and a space was not met by the deadline. So that's where we went to the Native Sons Hall. Comox was asked to consider, and we passed the motion. So it was an unfortunate situation that it became where only on those cold kind of threshold evenings, a space was not found based on there not being an ability to find a landlord or a space that suited the need for 100 to 150 folks to be sheltered safely and effectively. It is over to the province, who I believe has said sometime in the next short term, 1 to 2 years, that Courtenay would be being looked at as a shelter space, but I don't have an update on that. So that's something, hopefully being the new year, they'll update. But that was kind of a unsuccessful attempt to find a space for the 2 months over the winter. So we'll see how that evolves, and I'll update if I have any further information. And of course, they decided CVRD didn't opt to use Comox spaces that were put forth, and they went with the Native Sons Hall for the -4 and beyond. And I will go over to CAO Wall and the other items for B&B.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with the changes that are coming in regarding Airbnb. I know that the province is going to make it easier for the municipalities to collect that data and understand which ones we have operating within our community. Director Cummins, do you have a sense of what the number may be? Jeffrey, you may have an idea as well. And if you don't, that's okay.
No, I don't know.
So one thing I can say is, Council, in the last term, there was discussion, and we were getting prepared to move forward on regulating Airbnbs within the community. Council then gave direction for us to work with the city of Courtenay before moving forward, and partner with the city of, or the town of Cumberland, the village of Cumberland as well. Cumberland moved forward on their own. The city of Courtenay never did move forward. We got caught sort of in limbo there, so we didn't move forward either. And where we are right now is the Airbnbs aren't really a high priority with the huge amount of other changes that are coming in. What I suspect, unless council wants to provide other direction, is that we're going to move forward on handling all the other changes that are coming out from the province. And once those are done, we'll circle back and deal with the and look at the Airbnbs if it's something that council wants to manage at that time. Again, you can provide different direction. It's just magnitude of impact right now. I'm not sure Airbnb is going to be the most important item.
Just quickly update too, when the new regulations came out, there was like a couple-hour meeting to update on some of the highlights of it, and it really seemed to resonate more with like Victoria, Vancouver, and what the purpose, they were really trying to stop purpose-built Airbnb, like full buildings. And at the time, the record asked for comment on how many we had, how like some of the data, and we didn't have the data, but we quickly kind of looked, and out of the 70 to 80 Airbnbs, like 60 or 70 of them were operating in people's house. Like they actually didn't meet the threshold either. So it did kind of look at, when you looked at Comox specific limited data we had, it wasn't like one of the bigger things that we would have the resources to look at, which is kind of good that it's not. And then on the housing summit that's coming up on February 13th, 14th, I think it's open for any councillors who would like to attend. And I'm not sure if if yourself or someone else was looking at going to that, but it's open. I attended last year and it was pretty informative, and I imagine this year will be even more, and I'm a maybe to going, still working out scheduling.
I noticed there's virtual option this year, and
Yes,
that looked really attractive. Yeah. Okay. Thank you
Good
very
for a
much.
2-day. Other items to be pulled out, Councillor Kerr.
Just a process question. There's one related to a future agenda topic tonight. Should we just chat about it then? This is D, dealing with minor variance applications, and we're talking about delegation of minor variance applications to staff. So can we just talk about this letter then? Okay.
Either is fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Either
Okay.
location.
Let's do it then.
We'll do it when it comes up on the agenda. Okay. Other items to be pulled from the consent agenda. Okay, we will move on. Thank you for that discussion. So we have unfinished business. We have the letter from Richard Elsay, which is a follow-up from their delegation on December 6th on our municipal marina. So the group is opposed to paying additional fees and proposes the creation of a marina advisory group to recommend rates based on tenant needs and preferences. So there's been a follow-up from that group to us on that question, and just over to staff for questions. We can either choose to pull this out for discussion and decide, or otherwise we can, there's no motion necessarily that needs to take place. It's a
Correct, no motion necessary, and you have this item on later on in this agenda as well.
okay. If council's okay, I would like to just add this portion to the part where we're actually talking about marina, as we know that's something that they've put forward, so it makes sense to talk about it all together. So if there's no disagreement on that, we will now move to the unfinished business of the CVRD delegation from Mike Zabarski, which was also December 6th. And that was, they were looking for town support to go to the EVO e-bike program, which they presented to us that evening. So they are looking for a formal motion, my understanding is, with a letter of support. So I will open that up for discussion. If anyone has any comments or feedback on that, it was kind of somewhat of a pilot coming to Courtney and Comox. Councillor Blacklock.
So when I visit other communities that have Evo or LimeWire, a similar electric scooter program, where when you're done with the bikes, you just park them as is, wherever, and take a picture of it with the app, and it releases the bike back into the system. And you go to Kelowna, and those scooters are everywhere. They're all over the sidewalks. They're all over the streets. And you wonder to yourself, well, who is liable if somebody runs into this thing parked on the sidewalk? So my only concern with the Evo stations and Evo bikes is that they have a central docking station. If they don't, can we have legal look at the contract between Evo and municipality? Like, what are we responsible for as far as where these things are left? And what if someone, the rest of it I'm good with. I love the program. I love using those things wherever they are. They're great for tourists, people who travel without bikes. They love when they visit a place to grab one of those things and, go for see the sights by bike or e-bike in this case. My only concern is will they be docked in specific places? Like, will we have a corral for them at the mall or one at the airport or wherever we're going to put them, or wherever they're going to put them? But if they're allowed to be left wherever, which I assume will not be happening, since that would be like at people's houses and things, that we are legally okay to be leaving these things out, that we assume no risk.
If you want to consider what type of motion you would to capture that might be a good consideration. They did say during the presentation there would be zones, but I think the reality is it's right. If you take it somewhere and you don't check it back in, there still will end up. But we can also stress in a motion that we confirm the legal contract, confirm that there are, they talked about green painted zones from memory. But of course, if you're taking it to a friend's house or outside of a business, you're going to be leaving it outside the business. So
Like if you took one to the spit and it ended up in the ocean, who's responsible for that?
right.
Right.
So potentially preliminary approval, but needing to have more of a contract before approval. Other comments or questions about their request for a preliminary letter of support from the town of Comox. Councillor Grant.
Well, I was actually going to make a motion, but if we do want to get that, I'm almost certain that they had zones that you could leave them in, and that's how you shut the timer off to be paying for them, is by leaving them in those zones. So if you take it down to the spit and leave it there, you're just going to continually get charged till you turn it back into one of the green zones, is my understanding.
It's my understanding also, but I don't know if if there's that, there'd probably be other scenarios. I don't
But
believe
are
they
these
said we'd be
screens,
liable.
are these zones then on public property or private property? Right, that would be, I should have been asking these
I
questions.
think they were direct with the
a month ago.
business. Yeah. Over to staff. When we do a letter of support, can it be preliminary based on receiving more information, just to make sure the liability and the legal is something that town would have also a lawyer look at?
I'm just thinking about what that would look like. I mean, ultimately, it sounds like there may be a desire from council to understand sort of the liability issues that may sit there. And so if that's what your concern is, I think it would be better that we bring those answers to council, and council makes the determination whether you find them acceptable. And maybe I'm going to turn this over to Director Russwin, which you may know. I believe they're looking for more than just a letter of support. I believe they're looking for the town to support the project to allow these to be stationed on our property. So if council does have those liability concerns, I think it would be best to have them answered, brought to you, and then you can decide if you want to move forward or not.
Okay, and just for further clarification, do we need, if we're basically supporting in theory, but have some questions, we probably don't need a motion. That could just go back to them with the questions that we do have in regards to liability.
Yeah, if
And
you
where they're going liability.
correct, I think the best way to move forward is either approve the project if that's what you wish to do, and if you have questions, pass a motion with the general understanding of what information you're looking for. We'll get that information, bring it back to you, and then just probably come back on the next agenda. I don't think these are questions that'll be too hard to get answered.
I think they answered most of them at the thing, but I can't remember the answers. So are you asking us to just give us your questions now in a motion?
I think that makes more sense.
Yeah. Or the topics that you
Yeah.
not the specific questions, but at least the topics you want information on.
So location of the parking spots, liability when things are hit, missing, all liability. Councillor Kerr.
Just the only other thing that really excited me about the project was the Philburg Fest and Nautical Days weekend. And just maybe even if we're going to ask some questions, maybe just like locking that down and ensuring that we're going to have a plan for that, maybe more bikes in this area or more parking available for the bikes coming from Courtney those weekends.
So kind of making sure that the festivals are built in as part of their plan for Comox specifically. Councillor Mayor.
And I really wanted to make sure that staff had input into the boundaries that they were setting, just because we have more of the local knowledge. I didn't want places to be excluded that shouldn't be excluded, essentially.
Goose Pit.
For example, Goose Pit.
Staff input on boundaries. Okay, so we've got 4 or 5 questions back. If there are any, it'd be good now to try to incorporate all the questions that you would have before making the decision so that we can hopefully get them an answer sometime in February. So any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion that staff will go back and ask questions about the EVO program in regards to where the liability is if one gets stolen or gets hit by a vehicle. Where the locations are going to be, if they're on town property, business property, etc. What the plan would be for Comox specific festivals like Nautical Days and Philburg Festival, and if there's a way we can ensure that we have those details in the plan, and that staff have an input on the boundaries of where these bikes can go in or around town of Comox. Thanks, Councillor Grant. Seconder, and any questions or additions to that? Great, all those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. So we're just going to send those questions back to Mike Swarsky at the CVRD before we proceed with support. So now we're on to page 68. We have the 2024 Marina Rates Bylaw number 2010 2.01. This is coming back to the bylaw that we visited in early December. This current version includes a 2.21% increase on the per foot moorage and a 10% on all other marina services, which is on page 72 in an appendix. And what it has done is it changes where the improvement fee won't be looked at by council until 2025, and we have some of the future economic development and marina plans more in place. And on the docket, we have second and third reading. Just a quick clarification question, was first reading not including the improvement fee when we did the first reading?
Correct. Yes.
Good, just to clarify. Thought we had kind of moved it first reading for discussion. Councillor Grant.
Do we know how many of the boats in the marina belong to Comox residents and how many are from outside of Comox?
I believe we could find that out. Do we know? No.
I know it's a
Is
tough
it-
question, but
Is it easy to take a look, or is it looking at every single slip and finding out what the address is? 46%? Oh, so they
46%
had
of
the,
what? What is that?
So according to the Boaters Group, 46% of boats in the municipal marina are owned by residents living in Comox, the town.
So we have 54% of the boats down there don't even belong to people in Comox.
That's correct math.
Well, I'm just wondering because I listen, I look at Cumberland, we get United Riders come and ask for money for their trails, especially at the RD. We have the people from Sid Williams coming looking for money to help us out because we all use it. It seems to me that our marina is being used by everybody, actually more people than in our town, and we're bearing all the cost. So it bugs me that we have to pay all the time for all the other communities, but we never go and ask for someone to help us out. I look at Philbert Lodge much the same way. We're providing a great service, and yet we don't go and ask for everybody to help us out. So I wonder if there's some way for us to either charge more if you're not from Comox, and that way being able to lower the rates for the Comox guys, or maybe ask for some help from some of the other communities, because this is a huge cost for us. And the maintenance is large on this and Philbert. And, I get the math here that Jeffrey's put together, and I appreciate the fact that we have to charge rates that are in or around this range because we have a lot of annual upkeep to do. But, when we're supplying this service for 54% of the boats, not even our citizens, it seems like we got something a little bit backwards here.
I think that's where the improvement fee in theory comes in, where it starts to add money to cover all costs plus future costs, whereas right now we're pretty much breaking even with the marina. So we can look at the improvement fee again this year as an option, but on what's set in front of us is that we do the 2.21% and the 10% on the general services. So do you have any amendments, Councillor Grant, or more comments for how we maybe look at this next year in 2025?
I just think it's something we should be keeping in mind because costs are going up at all times, and we're providing quite a good service for the entire valley. And perhaps we could get a little shared cost on that in some way. I don't think it's probably too late for this year, but certainly for next year, we should be looking at that kind of thing.
Or at least looking at having the increase be higher than inflation, because 2.21% won't get us too far, but it is what we passed last meeting. So we can either look at it again or look at that. The other thing we will have to address after we look at this is there a request to have a committee? We'll look at that secondary. Councillor Blacklock.
Well, I come back to the basic economics of our marina. And when you look at some supply and demand factors, when you've got a 15-year waiting list looking to access your supply of boat slips, then that might tell you that the price point might be a little too low. Especially when it comes to covering the actual capital replacement costs of this marina, which are going to be huge. So if we're in the marina business, and the marina is not, despite Mr. Elsey's comments, like the rec center, It is not like the rec center. It is a user pay facility, and adding some mortgage payments so that the marina can cover its future capital requirements is no problem in my book. And if people down there don't like that, well, there's 15 years worth of people waiting to take your spot. So that's it.
Thanks for those comments, Councillor Blacklock. Looking for any other comments or suggested amendments? Otherwise, we will look at the second reading in front of us. Councillor Haslett online.
I really do understand what Ken had said there with respects to reaching out to the other communities, and we may be a little bit behind the ball on that this year, but I think it's something that we should absolutely do moving forward. We have a really great product here, and the fact that the majority of it's being used by residents outside of the town of Comox, I think that we really need to take that into account. As he said, other communities are doing the same thing, coming to us and asking for money, so I think that we should probably be doing the same thing.
Thanks for those comments, Councillor Haslett. Any other comments? Councillor Kerr.
Just clarification on our vote. Are we voting to approve it with the inclusion of the improvement fee?
Our current motion is without the improvement fee, and the improvement fee is getting put forward to 2025 for consideration. And so it is not part of this plan. And the percentages are just the 2.21 on the per foot moorage and the 10% on all other services. But it does kick the improvement fee out to 2025, and we'd be reconsidering it basically at that time.
Right. So then as a follow-up, for the improvement fee, is there also a consideration, and maybe this is a question for staff, Mayor, for increasing the boat launch fees, the day rates, and also the annual rates to help with that improvement fee? Because I think the voters group that has spoken, they're okay with the capital cost. They're not thrilled with $100,000 subsidizing town coffers, but it's this improvement fee that's the real bee in their bonnet. So one of the thoughts proposed by them was, well, what about if the improvement fee is going to mostly improve the marina services not on the docks? What are some other revenue sources the town has for that? Could the boat launch fees, daily and annual, be the main source of revenue generation to go towards that?
Go over to staff, and I believe some of those are the ones getting the 10% increase this year, but over to CAO Wall.
Thank you. Ultimately, council can decide how much and where you want to collect that improvement fee from. So you can absolutely do that. We right now started this and through the lens of capital replacement, specifically of the marina. We'll have to do that same sort of lens on our launch pass rates and how that's working. And you can but you can attribute the costs where you want to. And that's part of the reason why we were looking to move the discussion of the improvement fee to 2025, because right now it was just a way to start to collect revenue towards projects that we haven't identified yet. By next year, what we should be able to do is identify what projects we want to move forward with, how much those projects are going to cost, and then you can actually have that calculation of how much do you want to collect from the marina, how much do you want to try and get from launch passes, and look at it a little bit more in focus than what we have right now, which is we know we're going to need funds, so let's start collecting them.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Discussion Councillor Granite and I've been having is, could that improvement fee be attributed to the non-Comox resident boat owners only? So maybe that could be when we look at this again next year, could that come back as maybe one of the options for us to consider, in addition to the day passes and those types of things? So again, it's this hybrid of, is it a recreation facility? Is it a municipal service? Is it a user group, user pay group facility? It's kind of a Venn diagram of all of those. So, maybe that's one way we look at it as well. I don't know if the CAO has any comments on that.
With the changes that will be made after these increases are fully accounted for, I think it's over the next 5 years, the marina will no longer, the marina will be fully paying for itself. So that won't be a drain on the taxes of the residents of Comox. If council wants to move into a differential payment system based on where your address is, whether you live in Comox or not, we need direction from council to go down that path. There are numerous jurisdictions in British Columbia that do establish these types of differential rate charging. It's not something that's in the valley right now. It's something that we can move to. I just would put the idea out there for council that if you start it, you don't know where it's going to stop.
Okay, that answers your question, Councilor Kerr. Other questions or comments on the current bylaw in front of us at 2.21% on the footage and 10% on additional services?
I would move second reading.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Grant. So moving second reading of the bylaw regulation amendment bylaw number 2010.01 as it is for second reading, and a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Swift. Thank you. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. If I can get a motion for a third reading. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. And the last, that the Comox Municipal Marina Improvement Fee be forwarded to 2025 rate considerations upon the completion of the Economic Development and Downtown Action Plan. Moved. Seconded. Thank you. Any questions on the improvement fee being moved forward when we may have more specifics on those projects? Any questions? Councillor Blacklock.
Just, could we see the, or OCP review having a marina section, or is that, we're going to keep that within the economic development plan?
I'm going to send that over to CAO Wall.
I believe part of it will depend on the decisions you make later on regarding with the OCP, but our recommendation is to not include any of those sorts of plans within the OCP and have them housed within their own plans and policies.
Other questions on the improvement fee motion? All those in favor of moving that to 2025? And opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We're going to quickly bring back the group. I wanted to have a Marina Advisory Group. We don't necessarily have to make that motion, but is there anyone who has any questions, comments, or would want to make a motion of that? We're going to go over to CAO Wall first.
Thanks. I just wanted to inform council that part of the downtown and economic development plan that's being created, I believe one of the recommendations that's going to come out of it is a marina user group. However, that marina user group is going to be looking at the marina more widely. The businesses, the marina users, the actual marina users would be welcome to have a representative there, the Harbor Authority, the businesses that are there as well. So that is an official group that I believe will come out as a recommendation from this plan. You certainly could have two groups supported by administration or by the town down at the marina. But another thing that could be done is that the group there the marina users could form their own association. They don't need the support of the town to do so. However, council, we certainly could support them in doing if you wish.
Thanks for those comments. First, I'm okay at this time to leave it personally, and I think that we would like to see what comes out of that action plan and the more specifics of their advisory group. But if anyone... Okay, so it looks like we're going to leave that there for now, and we'll get back to them with their welcome to form an association of their own administration if they choose to do that. So there's no special reports. Bylaw adoption, we're on page 79. We have an amendment to the Town of Comox Subdivision and Development Servicing Bylaw 1261 to alter Cypress Road design standards, and that is on the sidewalks there. Just looking for the motion wording. That's right. So the recommendation is the Town of Comox Subdivision and Development Servicing Amendment Bylaw number 2015-2023, attachment 1, be adopted. Moved Seconded. Any questions or comments? Councillor Mayer.
I actually have, it's a bit of a broader question, not about this specific situation, but first of all, maybe acknowledging that there has been exceptional barriers for the folks who wanted to do this subdivision to begin with. What I'm wondering is, with the new provincial regulation, if we're going to run into more kind of decision points like this for council, where we're needing to make adjustments in this way, if staff anticipate seeing this more.
Over to Sayawal.
Thank you. Yes, I believe so. You know, the province has fundamentally altered the level of density that we need to expect in almost every area of our community. What we are doing through the Complete Communities Grant is trying to identify where that densification may take place, where the pedestrian routes are. And the hope is that through that type of analysis feeding into the OCP, we'll be able to take a look at what do we want to do to move forward for pedestrian access, and taking a look at it on a community-wide basis and making and setting those standards for when we're going to have sidewalks, where we're going to have them, what are the size going to be across the whole community. So the hope is that we're headed into a more structured approach to making these decisions, rather than kind of what we're doing right now, which is making very localized decisions based on the current conditions in that one area.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? I believe these came out of a public hearing back in 2022, so before some of our current terms council on some of the homeowners' comments on that street and it not being a necessary item. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. So we're moving on to new business, page 87. We have development permit variance application DVP 23-15 for 2090 Beaton Avenue. Moved, seconded. Any questions or comments? And that's the studio in the adjacent yard. No questions or comments. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to page 97, we have the 2024 operating budget report. The council approved Schedule A attached to the January 2024 report, with funds included for a term Deputy Director of Development Services and $80,000 in additional funds for staff in the Recreation Department included to the 2024-2028 financial plan. It's moved. And a seconded. Thank you. Questions or comments on those two items in the Schedule A? Any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. The second part is that council approve 50% of all non-market growth for the 2024 financial plan to be included as approved operating expenses, including the hiring of an additional seasonal parks employee. Can we get a motion? Seconded. And just questions or comments. My question over to Sayawal or staff would be, is there any reason not to do a higher percentage, like 100% of that 100? The exact number, 135, 140,000, because we already have like our special projects and all the other items funded. Is like, where else would that money typically go that we wouldn't assign 100% to our operational budget?
Well, at the risk of talking you out of giving us more staff funds, I think that there are
towards staff funds, not additional.
Yeah, towards staff funds. I think there's a couple items that you may want to consider having some flexibility on. There are requests that have come to you from the BIA in order to support their events. There is likely going to be a need to increase the nautical days budget moving forward. You also have a request from Destair earlier today, and a number of other funding requests that have come in. And as well, you could use alternatively, you could use those funds to decrease the level of tax increase that's required this year. So if council wishes to increase that number to 100%, I will not say no, But I think you're going to want that flexibility over the next few meetings to be able to allocate those funds to a few places.
Okay, that made a lot of sense with some of those other items that are coming in the miscellaneous. Thank you. Other questions or comments for that 50% of allocation on non-market growth? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. We're now on fees and charges bylaw number 2016-02 on page 104, that the fees and charges amendment bylaw be given first reading. Get a motion. Moved. Seconded. Thank you. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. If we can get a motion for second reading. Thank you. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. And third reading for fees and charges amendment bylaw 2016.02. If we can get a motion. Thank you. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Delegation of minor DVPs to staff, page 112, that the town prepare a first, second, and third reading report to amend COBOC's planning procedures bylaw 1780 to delegate to the Director of Development Services the power to issue minor development variance permits in accordance with the framework described in the January 24th, 2024 staff report for PR 23 to 29, delegation of minor DVPs to staff, and B, amend the parking regulations contained in Comox zoning bylaw 1850 to apply the downtown parking standards for dimensions of maneuvering, aisles, parking, and loading spaces to the entire town. I can get a motion. Moved and seconded. Questions or comments on the delegation of minor DVPs? Councillor Grant.
Just have one question. So we would still talk to the neighbors and make sure that everybody was happy if we did this, because I think this is well overdue, by the way, but I just want to make sure that it's not going to change too radically that people won't even know in the neighborhood what's going on.
Great question, Councillor Garcia Wall.
I'll turn that over to Director Commends.
There's proposed to have no public consultation or notification. The intent of the scheme was to reduce processing times for minor variances and also to reduce the amount of staff time necessary to process them. And so the proposal you have before us is very limited in scope and is really on specific identifiable, ascertainable items. And does not get into, tries very much not to get into items that are going to be questions of neighbor compatibility or neighbor opinion. We have to advertise, we significantly increase the processing time, and then you also end up into a situation where you've got a non-elected representative determining policy in terms of individual differences of opinion.
No, that makes sense. Thank you.
Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, and that answers my question related to the consent item agenda D from Mr. McLaughlin asking about would neighbors be notified. So that's great. Thanks, Councillor Grant, for asking that.
And just for clarification, this would still come back to council as a report for final reading? It's to
Correct.
prepare the report?
It will require adoption, yeah.
Yes, okay, correct. So this is the first kind of approval to go forward with the report that will come back to council, just to clarify. Okay, other questions on the delegation of minor DVPs to staff? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to page 123, we have the Home Energy Navigator program. It's that the town of Comox contributes $26,000 to the Home Energy Navigator or HEN program in collaboration with the Comox Valley Regional District, Comox First Nation, and City of Courtenay. And there was a package there with where the program has been operating and what it entails for residents to apply to. Questions or comments or a motion to move the $26,000? Councillor Kerr.
Well, I guess to get the conversation started, I'll move the motion as read under item 1.
It's helpful. Thank you. Moved and seconded. So comments, questions? We'll start with Councillor Kerr and then Councillor Grant, please. Oh, okay. We'll go with Councillor Kerr and then we'll go to Councillor Hazlitt online.
So, you know, this is a well subscribed program in many communities or similar variants across the country. The key element of success, because homeowners want to do something, they want to maybe get a heat pump or windows, or they don't know where to start. The key element of success for all of these successful programs across the country to improve energy efficiency of homes is having this navigator, having someone who can actually say, yeah, in your house, the most bang for your buck is going to be this. It's going to cost this much. Here's how to apply for the provincial rebate. And without kind of a navigator, a catalyst, these programs don't have the success. This is a very small amount of money for us to spend as a town to improve our greenhouse gas emission reduction as a community and have a positive impact on climate change. So I'm fully supportive of this program. Thanks.
Thanks for the comments. Councillor Hazlitt.
So my question on this is Green City essentially a third-party consultant that we pay, and then through either us or the homeowner would essentially reach out to these people and say, I want to put a heat pump in my home. And they come along and say, you know, maybe you don't want a heat pump, maybe you want to go electric baseboard.
From my understanding, it is a third party that operates, but I'm
So
not sure if staff
my
has
question
any
is,
further
at what
information.
point does it fall onto the homeowner to really be able to do the research for themselves instead of us paying for a third-party consultant to come in and essentially tell them what they could go do? Like I have a house. I know that heat pumps are worth a lot of money, and I know that there's rebates out there. So I, call around, you get a couple of quotes, and they tell you this is how much it's going to cost. These are the rebates that are available to you. And I don't want to see the town going and funding projects or essentially taking onus away from the homeowners to do the research on their own.
Thanks for those comments online. Other Councillor Blacklock and then Councillor
It says in the package here and information provided about the program that $26,000 will cover the consultations for 61 homes. So that's $426 per home. I don't know if, I think there probably is 61 homeowners that would take advantage of this. But I do wonder whether those same 61 homeowners wouldn't be able to sort of navigate this and figure this out on their own. Like Chris said, it's not that hard a process to put a heat pump in your house. And I know that there's a lot of information online, but I don't think we need an additional $26,000 of Comox taxpayers' money to help 61 people put a heat pump in their house.
Thanks, Councillor Blacklock. Councillor Mayer.
I totally appreciate what Councillors Blacklock and Hazlitt are saying. Having been a household who recently navigated this, it's not about getting the heat pump. It's actually about navigating the government rebates. And I know, it seems like it shouldn't be hard, but actually, it's absurdly challenging. And so what I think is missing is actually that piece of advocacy where we're asking both the province and the federal government to make their programs, their rebate programs, easier. I do also think when we're looking at GHG reductions, it's the existing buildings that are our biggest emitters. And those are the ones that we really have no programs for beyond these rebates. So this is actually, to me, like a really small step that we can take that would actually help us reduce GHG emissions. So from that perspective, I'm in favor of it, with the addition of us also doing the advocacy work, because we're basically paying for these poorly designed programs.
Thanks for those comments. Yeah, after kind of reading through the documentation and seeing the success of it being a primer in some of the other regional districts and areas, and being that the rest of the region is kind of jumping on board for the dollar value it is, understanding it'll be individual households that do benefit. I think it's a good start on the advocacy and education for homeowners to see how they can retrofit their homes. And I have navigated some of these grants myself on my household, and it is very, very complex, and some of the grants don't get done. So being that a lot of this information is new in the last 4 or 5 years on grants for solar, grants for windows, I think it's a good timing for this type of support from the municipality. And being that the 26,000 is something I think we can absorb for it to be a primer for education for residents, I am in support. Councillor Hazlitt and then Councillor Kerr.
So in the event that we push this through and 26,000 goes into this, what happens to the remainder of the money? Does it just carry over to the next year, included into the next 26,000 in the event that it's not used by any of the homeowners?
I believe it was a one-time funding request and not necessarily a yearly program, but I don't have the answer to what happens if funds are not applied for. I'm not sure if staff has the answer to that.
Thank you. I'm also not aware to what will happen to the funds if they're not used. I would imagine it is, you know what, it would depend on how the contract is structured, and that contract is with the CVRD, not with the town. So I think it's best if I don't take any guesses on it. Having said that, once the idea would be for the $26,000 to fund that number of the support for that number of homes, and once it's done, if council wanted to continue to support homes in this manner, you would have to continue to fund the program. So it's not 26,000 in perpetuity; it'll be 26,000 to fund X number of home supports.
Thanks for the clarification on CVRD, probably holding that information. Councillor Kerr.
So we did this ourselves in our home. We paid for a home energy audit. I think it was around $450, and then they gave us the recommendations to do, and we prioritized them and tackled them over the years. So I wonder, maybe for councillors sitting on the fence, I wonder if there'd be a way to set this so that it's like based on like income or some kind of other tiering where it's made available to those in the public in Comox that aren't wouldn't be able to afford this necessarily, and those that could drop $450 on a home energy audit could do so and not be part of this program. So it's one of those things like equity and fairness as well. Like those that are probably more likely to jump on this might have the means to actually pay for it themselves. So could we is there a way, I don't know if I'm reading through this information, I don't see that in this, but is there a way for us to tie it to either income level or some other statistic that would help us stratify who would most benefit from this?
I agree. I don't believe that was in the package, but it would have to be a follow-up with the CVRD who holds the contract likely to find out what that would look like for Comox to add in. Councillor Swift and then Councillor Grant.
I'm basically in support of this, but I know as taxpayers, we're paying for an individual to make some savings in their home. And I'm wondering if there would be any appetite to cost share the $425 so that the town was paying for half and the homeowner is paying for half. They'd have more ownership of the process, and we'd be able to do twice as many homes. The only other problem is, would that be unnecessarily complicated from the administration's point of view?
Just trying to decide how to. It sounds like the last two questions, as far as an income threshold and kind of a 50-50 shareholder, would both go back to the CVRD for clarification on how, because it's Comox First Nations, it's a bunch of stakeholders. We probably would have to go back for clarification on those two things so far. I believe it was Councillor Grant and then Councillor Mayer.
Yeah, I like Jen's idea that I think we should be advocating. These grant programs should not be that difficult to go through. I mean, honest to God, only government can make it that difficult, and it should be dead simple. But My problem with this program is that everybody in town is going to pay the $26,000. Only 61% are actually going to get the benefit. Yeah, 61 people are going to get the total. So, I mean, I like the advocacy piece. I think it should be made quite simple, but I have a hard time with everybody paying so 61 can get the benefit. That doesn't seem like good math to me.
Councillor Mayer.
I didn't mean to actually, I would like to respond to that because I don't think it's as much about the homeowner. Well, from the municipal perspective, I think it's more about the GHG reductions on the existing buildings than it is about the energy savings that the homeowner might experience. But I get what you're saying. I'm actually now really confused about what this program is based on, because if it's in lieu of paying for a home energy advisor, it's actually a completely different service than I thought it was. We also paid for a home energy advisor. And I didn't understand that that's what this was. So if we're going back to the CVRD, I'd just like clarification about how it's the same or different from the home energy advisor program that already exists. I would say if it is meant instead of paying the home energy advisor, then I would be in favor of looking at Councillor Swift's proposal, or somehow looking at an income threshold. Because for me, this wasn't about income, it was about actually navigating a really challenging program. So now I'm not sure what it's for.
And I took it as also that it was the auditor position that it was paying, like that it was in place of that. So it sounds like we need some clarification. And then also if we had some other, whether they'd be possible or not, so we can make a proper decision. So kind of similar to the EVO, it looks like we've got 3 kind of questions to put back to them before we would make a decision on this. Is staff aware of any timeline that is required on this that they had asked us for?
Yeah, this CVRD is hoping to make a public announcement on this with all the participating jurisdictions in the very near future. The idea behind the HEN program is not that they will replace an energy efficiency audit. They will assist homeowners in understanding, for example, do you need to get a home energy efficiency audit? Are there any grants out for home energy efficiency audits? Do you likely need a heat pump? If you do need a heat pump, is there a grant opportunity for you to get it? Are you going to need a home energy audit in order to get the grant? That's sort of the idea behind the program. I don't believe what will happen is somebody will be coming to your home and providing you that energy efficiency audit. However, they may take a look at your home and say, hey, your windows are 20 years old. There's a great grant out for windows right now. Here's where you can go and make the application. Here's the information you're going to need. So it's more about connecting people with the opportunities that are out there than providing, sort of strict infrastructure advice to homeowners. Your other questions around having it be 50%, we can send those questions to the CVRD. I think they would be hoping, though, that council, you would make your decision. I know they're hoping that you would make a decision tonight. If you're not prepared to, they'd definitely be hoping you would make it in the first meeting in February.
Thank you for that clarification. And at this time, as in the report, City of Courtenay allocated 50,000 and Cumberland is allocated 12,500, and it does not specify First Nation. So we do have those questions. Do we want to push kind of the deadline until early February and just get some clarifications before we send that final answer, and know that kind of we're on a deadline here, but it didn't sound like we were going to move to a decision this evening without some clarification?
So then would we just table the motion?
We would table the motion. That being said, if someone wants to make a motion and have the decision sent tonight, you are welcome. I think we can probably push the deadline slightly and just hope to get some clarifying questions.
I think I did make the motion and it was seconded, so there was a motion on the floor. So I'm just process-wise, can we just table it until our next meeting and get the questions in the meantime? Is that?
I believe we would vote the motion down, but just for clarification from staff, since there already is a motion on the table, or are we able to?
I believe it would be best to deal with the motion that's on the table and then provide additional direction. So if you, the motion on the table would be to support the program. So if you want to support the program as is, you can pass it. If you wish to defeat it, you can do that and then provide next direction, either move it to the next meeting or something different.
So again, we are going to vote on the motion. We can defeat the motion and clarify that we just have some questions, and that would be the new motion that gets sent out. So we'll deal with it in two parts. If you do want to see it go ahead just exactly as is, you would vote in favor. And otherwise, we will address the questions in a second motion. Councillor Kerr.
And we could always support the motion and get the questions afterwards as well. So, because that discussion could happen.
Correct.
If council's,
But the decision would have been made by that point also.
just trying to think this through. So, sorry, Councillor Kerr, your question was you could support the motion with the funding and then change the funding allocation per home in the future. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean,
If you support it either way.
I support it regardless.
Yeah.
So if it's split a 50-50 as Councillor Swift suggested, if it's income threshold, all of those I love and I'm happy with. I'm also happy with that as it stands. So I can vote forward, and then those ongoing discussions with the CVRD, working out the best plan. You know, we could deal with those after the logistics.
Okay.
Councillor Mayer.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I would support the motion moving forward with us making those fine-tune adjustments. I don't think we need to make it overly complicated. It's just about supporting existing building stock and reducing GHGs. And if we think it's worth testing it out with this program, so I'm in favor.
Okay, so if you are voting in favor, it would be that we send kind of our recommendations for how it could look or suggestions, but it would be still supporting the program regardless so that they could move forward with the announcement. So the motion on the floor is the town of Cobox contribute $26,000 to the Home Energy Navigators program in collaboration with the CVRD, Comox First Nation, and City of Courtenay. Looking through the report, it's also the Village of Cumberland is in there listed. All those in favor? And opposed? And that motion is defeated. Is there any follow-up motion in regards to if councillors would like to find out if there would be a different method for the allocation of those, the $461? And so if we had in a second motion, it would kind of go along with the defeated motion, or we'd pass along, communicate that with our defeated motion. Councillor Swift?
Well, I don't know what the wording of the motion would be, but I'd like to have those questions answered before we vote on it wholeheartedly to support it. Yeah.
Okay, so I made some notes. The questions would be would there be any consideration for an income threshold? Would there be any consideration? That was the first question. Second question, would there be any consideration for like a 50-50 split between the program and the homeowner? And the third question, although we might have had clarification, but we can ask again, is does it take over the auditor position, which it sounds like it doesn't. Yeah, I also had thought it did, so. Yeah, I think it's because reading the material, it did kind of make it sound like it did, so. So we have a motion on the floor. I'll second that to ask those three questions, which would get kind of sent along, I imagine, at the same time as the defeated motion. Any questions or comments on the motion with those three questions? Or just Councillor Mayer.
So I just want to double confirm, even though we just had it voted down, that it will come back once we get the answers to the questions.
We would get the questions back, and then at that time,
It'll come back. Is the main thing. Okay, thank you.
I can bring it back with answers, but it would have to be at the next council.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, all those in favor of asking those three questions? Opposed? Great, thank you, and that passes. Moving on to page 158, we have the official community plan review, project scoping, and RFP outline. So we're at the time where the OCP will go out for RFP in February. The council endorsed a proposed budget of $315,000, including $60,000 allocated to community engagement for the 2024 to 2025 OCP review, and direct staff to use a request for proposal focused on land use and meeting provincial regulation changes that are coming. Moved and seconded, so now we are open for discussion. Councillor Grant.
So I'm just wondering, is it prudent to get this in soon? I imagine that these people that do these reviews are probably going to be all tied up rather quickly in British Columbia if we don't get in soon. Is there, am I correct with that? Okay.
I think supply and demand would say there's definitely going to be a rush on planners, but over to CAO Wall for comment on how soon we get the RFP out.
Yeah, absolutely. The sooner we can get this out, better. The amount of municipalities that are going to be having to redo their OCP is honestly, it's probably everybody. Yeah. So if we can lock this down before the rush, I think it's going to bode very well for us.
Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I agree. Time is of the essence for this. I'm okay with the kind of medium plan for the consultation budget. I guess my biggest question, this would be page, oh boy, what page are we on? 159, you got it. So I know we want to keep it relatively tight in scope so that we can get it done in a timely fashion, have it really clear. And there's extra costs involved for, adding pieces onto the scope. For example, the environmental sustainability plan, 200,000. But we're already doing a climate change risk assessment and action plan. So, can that process be rolled into our OCP? Because they're happening kind of on parallel tracks. And a lot of times when we discuss them, even setting the budget for them, we kind of been working them together in a parallel system. So I kind of see them going hand in hand some way. So there's a way to merge them or have them at least have some touch points along the way. Because I do see, we need to provide 20 years of housing stock, but that's a huge impact on, tree canopy and, forests and urban forests and those types of things, rivers, streams, runoff, all of those environmental aspects. And I'd hate to have us just do a housing analysis of, 20 years where we need subdivisions and not also incorporate those important climate change pieces. So can we merge the two?
Over to staff on how those kind of will interlock with each other, if they do.
Thank you. And what's really fortunate, I think, just taking a step back in time and taking a look at this, is that we have known that we needed to update our OCP. And what we've done prior to that is start to get all of the foundational pieces of that completed. So the climate action plan that we're doing right now will provide council with a number of ideas and recommendations which can be included into the OCP if that's something that you want to bring in there. And that won't necessarily increase the scope or cost of doing the OCP because that work and recommendations will be done. So that is absolutely achievable. And I think there are going to be a number of items that come out of those plans that you're going to want to take a look at considering into your OCP. The downtown action, the economic development and downtown action plan is likely to identify items within it that you're going to want to consider into your OCP transitional zoning, what you want to see in your downtown as well. So those are items that can be thought of and considered in putting in to your OCP through your consultation process. And on top of that, as we're going through this, we're going to have to consider what the template zones are going to be for development in all the different areas. And in that as well, you're going to be able to rely on those two documents to see how you want to have them support each other. And finally, you will also have the, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, I forgot what the last point I was going to make is, but you're going to have all these documents to be able to feed into your OCP to make those decisions. You'll have the information in front of you, and I think you're going to be very well supported in data throughout the community. Oh, sorry, the last one I was going to add was the complete communities and the subdivision and servicing bylaws that we're looking at will be able to feed into them as well. We're really looking at doing a fundamental realignment and restructuring and rebuilding of all of the base documents that build into what makes this community great and what will make this community great into the future. And you're going to have all that information in front of you. So we've done, I think, a really good job in getting all of that information ready to go. So you don't have to go and try and build these additional plans into your OCP at the same time. You'll have the information you need to have the debates and discussion about what you want to pull from them and include in your OCP. And you'll also have the ability to take those plans and have them as standalone documents. So I think your point is well taken, that will be there for you.
Just as a follow-up, then would it be helpful in the motion that we vote on, like, in addition to your recommendation, just to indicate that we would like to have those elements dealt with or addressed by the OCP? And the other one's the accessibility audit, right? We have a Comox Valley-wide accessibility committee doing an audit. We don't need to redo that work. It can actually be embedded as part of the OCP process because that work will be done at that time. So would it be helpful for us to actually make that as part of the motion, ECDEV, climate change risk assessment action plan, downtown action plan, accessibility committee audit, complete communities? Like, should we list those?
I think we just want to make sure that we're being very precise on what you are intending by including them. So if we are talking about referencing the fact that these documents will be used as reference points to generate potential content for the OCP, I think that we can structure the recommendation to say that. I want to be careful, though, that we're making a very clear distinction between saying, let's use these documents that are being created to inform what will be in the OCP, and saying what we want to do is pull the programs from those documents and include them as their sections in the OCP, which is not what the recommendation is.
Councillor Mayer.
Just building on this conversation, this is my biggest concern with having. I support these items being excluded for the reasons that that was shared with us at that meeting, but I'm just really concerned that by decoupling it, really important decisions are going to be made without considering those additional pieces, and that some of those additional pieces that might become more important than they are right now, that we wouldn't have a process for identifying them and ensuring that their report is considered as guidance when we're making land use decisions. So I would just like to ensure that we have a robust process for picking what those additional pieces are, and for ensuring that they're included in decision making.
Director Commence, did you want to add to the discussion?
Yes, that's built into the proposal, page 167, section 1, background. One of the first things that they're going to do is review of related and supplementary and/or complementary plans, strategies, and bylaws provided by staff, zoning bylaw, and infrastructure plans, climate action plan, parks and land, transportation, downtown plan, housing needs assessment, etc. So those plans under this proposal, the work of those plans would be used in formulating the policies and content of the OCP. It would not go beyond that. So if you then wanted to have something more targeted, more expansive, that's not what would be done. That would require the additional funding. You would still have the ability after the OCP to undertake those additional detailed plans as to how you wish to further those issues. So that would still come back forward.
So how would we ensure that future land use decisions guided by the OCP include the reports that will now be external rather than included?
That would be the specific policies.
Okay, thank you. My second question is on the schedule that is being proposed. There's a number of touch points for council updates. I just wanted to clarify, is this the only chance for input and decision that council has? Like, are those just updates for information, or will we have additional opportunities to provide guidance and have input into decisions?
Thank you. I'll turn that over to Director Commence to answer, but I just want to go back to the first question because I think it's important that council really has a fulsome discussion around this point, because that really is the fundamental question that's being asked of you tonight. The guiding documents, those other documents that are being produced, will be reviewed and included in consideration for the policies that are coming into the OCP. And why it's important that we're having a very specific understanding of what the direction is because ultimately what we're talking about is how much we want to include these on a spectrum. And I want to make sure that council is quite clear that what we're talking about in this recommendation is, as far as the spectrum being, including fully fledged plans, which would have been sort of the standard practice 5 years ago, versus including just sort of the bare bones policy guidance, which would have been best practice 20 years ago and is coming back to best practice. The recommendation is to be much more on keeping the OCP a more bare bones document than it is a more expansive one. That's the recommendation that you have in front of you, and I want to make sure that council is comfortable with understanding that and you're comfortable with it moving forward, because I'm not sure that there is a general level of comfort around the table. And so I just encourage you to have that discussion and come to an ability to make a decision on that and move forward, because after we release this RFP, it is going to be incredibly difficult to unwind it and build it in at a later date.
Councillor Mayer for follow-up.
So to clarify, I support what is being proposed if there is a included in the OCP assurance or some kind of way to ensure that decision-making includes the, I don't know what to call the other documents that will be attached to it. But from what I understood from the consultant, that was the purpose, was that still those additional documents, so say it's climate action, say it's food security, say it's seniors health and wellness, that those are like a constellation that are interconnected with the OCP, but they're separate enough that we can update those guidances separately. They still need to be considered in decisions, and that's the piece where I feel like the link is not being made obvious. So how, I guess what I'm saying is, how can we make those linkages more obvious?
I think what the RFP is saying will be done, as Director Commend said, is though all of those documents and all of those policy guidances will be reviewed and considered for policy inclusion within the OCP. What we won't have are standalone policies that address each of those different issues within the OCP, and those standalone policies will exist by themselves on a standalone basis. So the OCP will, rather than be a more expansive document trying to manage larger areas of the community, it will be more focused on land use, with the potential for all of those items to be in there based on what is brought forward through community consultation and what is decided by council. So you have the ability for all of those policy items to inform the land use decisions, but what you wouldn't have are the actual policies living within the document. So I believe you should be comfortable in where we're going, but what it does mean is that those policies aren't going to automatically live in and be included in the RFP. So it's going to be an iterative process with council and the community, and council and the community are going to have to take responsibility for moving forward the items that they want to ensure are included in the OCP, because they're not automatically going to be built in within their own standalone plans.
So that leads to that second part of my question, which was, is this it for our real input and influence then? Like, are the rest of those touch points just information for us to receive? Or will we have other opportunities to provide direction and guidance?
Thank you. I'll turn that over to Director Commends.
The times to provide updates as to the progress and request direction from council, those would be those specific items as contained in the proposal. Those have significant implications in terms of timing and in cost. Being done, you can have an iterative process. So yes, if you want to expand that, you can either be looking at cutting back elsewhere in terms of policy development or expanding the budget. And that may affect your timelines.
Understood. Thank you.
Councillor Hazlitt, did you have a comment or question? No. Okay. So just to kind of, my questions that I had were pretty much along the same lines as Councillor Mayer. I think the timeline is good. That medium kind of budget was good, but just understanding that if we accept kind of the bare bones, which is what the consultant did recommend, to be able to be more versatile with kind of policy and reference document input to change more often than the OCP, we will, just as the community would during community consultation, have the opportunity to review some of those policy documents. And it's more work because at the time it'll be us reading these policies and trying to match OCP policy with these other guiding documents. But once if this motion as it is was approved, it's not that we wouldn't be able to later have that feedback and say, in this accessibility audit, these things were really important to Town of Comox and residents, and we don't quite see it in this policy. It's just that those documents themselves won't be verbatim written, but we will, as a council and a community, have the opportunity to kind of, I don't want to say check, but make sure what's important through these things we've approved and that are important do get incorporated in some way. It's just not directly, but we will be reviewing policies at the council table. This is not the last opportunity to do so.
Yeah, correct. I think you've summed that up really well. It's important to remember that just because something's not included in the OCP doesn't mean that there's no direction for items to be undertaken. Most of the work that we do today lives outside of direction from the OCP. The OCP is one document, and what municipalities have found is that growing the OCP to the size that it has grown to is actually hindering the ability for municipalities to move forward because, for example, on accessibility, rather than being able to take a look at an accessibility policy, see something that's not working, amend the policy and move forward, which is, a one-day process. When it lives in the OCP, now you're talking about putting out community notification, putting it in the paper, having first 3 readings, having public hearings, and then moving forward that way, which is time consuming and expensive. And that's another reason why municipalities are moving back to the OCPs being the land-based documents informed by those other information. But those policies, your age-friendly policies, your environmental sustainability, your downtown and economic development plans, live within their own documents, which can be amended and changed as the community sees fit.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Blacklock.
I'm just curious, we've talked about, Jordan just mentioned limiting the kind of, you don't want these OCPs to expand out, 400 or 500 pages. What did we pay the Arlington Group in 2011 to consult on our OCP? I'm a little curious as to what sort of escalation in consulting fees we could see from, 13 years? 13 years ago, I was a very active community member in the OCP last time. I attended sessions at the golf course. I attended sessions online and filled out surveys online. And I'm just wondering, at $315,000 for a document that is not, as robust as some of the other ones out there, are we good with that? Is that the going rate for OCP consultants these days?
Yeah, I'll ask Director Cummins to talk about if he knows what the cost was previously, but this budget is based on what we see as a realistic budget to accomplish what council wants to accomplish. It'll go to RFP. We'll get the best value for the dollar that we can, and that through that competitive process, we will be able to determine. But given the huge push of money from the provincial and federal governments, the huge rush and need for OCPs to be done, I think looking at it right now at the price that we have is going to look like a bargain in 6 months.
Yeah, and I bring that up because I did read, even today, there was an article, a media story about the lack of available professional planners in the province. Yeah. And how, a lot of municipalities are having trouble filling roles, and obviously, filling roles at certain salary levels. And so, yeah, I'm just wondering what the escalation has been.
I can get that. I'll have that to you tomorrow. I'll distribute it. We do have a contract. There is a significantly higher technical component now in terms of things like looking at the complete communities, actually matching your infrastructure and how you're going to fund your infrastructure. So a lot of the stuff that prior was left to deal with at the rezoning is now going to have to be built into the OCP itself, or done at the same time. And that's going to, so the complexity and sophistication of the actual content to make sure that you can actually build it has gone up. And I believe that's where you're seeing some of the money.
Councillor Kerr.
I mean, I think this is actually one of our most important conversations we'll probably have this year. Like, this is a really pivotal conversation. We haven't done our OCP change since 2011. There's all this stuff happening in the province, built at 44. Like, this is like pivotal stuff. So it's kind of like an exciting conversation we're having. For those of you out there watching online, I think this is really important. What I'm struggling with is having an OCP that is just looking at land use and housing. That is just so narrow-minded when there's so many overlapping elements of our community that we should be addressing at the same time. 10 years ago, Maple Ridge did their OCP, and just the description, just if you permit me, read 2 lines. We use land. This is their land use title slide. We use land in a manner that is environmentally sound and promotes healthy, self-sufficient, connected, safe, and inclusive communities. It reflects the need of our community, incorporates environmental protection principles, and includes universal accessibility for all citizens. So we're overlapping these very important concepts to build more housing in a way that it actually makes sense environmentally, makes sense accessibility-wise, makes sense with transit, makes sense with complete communities, fundamentals that are coming as well from the province. So I think if we look at the pendulum swinging back and forth, they got too big and too onerous and impossible to manage. And then there's the like bare bones. I guess the question is, what would it look like if we let's pick something in the middle? Not too big, not too small, the Goldilocks principle, just right. What would that look like in terms of scope and cost?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I think I wasn't very artful in my description at the beginning. I think we are at a Goldilocks with the 300,000 and what we're looking at, and the amount of data that we're going to be putting into it. The big items that are going to fundamentally inform the decisions that are going into this are your complete communities. And I think it's, if we pause for a second and think about what complete communities is looking at. Complete communities is looking at where can we provide pedestrian transportation networks? How can we increase bike ridership within the community? How can we ensure that there's a mix of commercial and residential development to decrease the amount of vehicle traffic that's required to go on our roads? And how can we ensure that there are recreation opportunities within walking distance of our residential nodes? And so when I'm talking about a bare bones document, when I was talking about a bare bones document, I think I was fairly inartful when I was saying that. What it means is that we're not including your economic development plans within it. You're not including your age-friendly plans within it. You're not including your accessibility plans, and you're not including your environmental sustainability plans. Those plans will live outside of the OCP, but the values and policies that will inform your housing and how your land will be used will be informed by the data collected through all of those, which is why I think we're in a really good position. We don't have to play catch up and get all of that information done and try and shoehorn it into the OCP, because we will have it already going into the OCP creation. And that's where, when I was talking about what the OCP will look like and how much of each of those principles will be included, will be determined through the consultation that happens with the community and the consultation that happens with council. You'll have the data in front of you. You'll have the data from complete communities. You'll have the data from your economic and development, economic and downtown master plan, and your climate action plans. How much of those items you want included and how much of those you want informing the land use decisions will be there for the community to make and will be there for council to make. So that will all be there. What won't be there is those plans living within the OCP. They'll live outside them.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Kerr? in some ways.
Yeah, it does. It does. Maybe just then in the description, even on page 159, where are we? 169, sorry. We have maybe even more of those listed. So the accessibility committee audit, I don't see there. The complete communities, I think once there. Just making sure that, yeah, it's there. Making sure that we have all the items that we're talking about listed in that description. That's great. Thank you for the explanation, CAO Wall.
Over to CAO Wall. I was just checking that list to see if there needs to be.
Thank you. We will review and make sure that we have a detailed list of all the documents that need to feed into it. I appreciate that input. And I think one thing for us to maybe consider as we step back and look at what's about to happen, we are, to your point earlier, about to embark on a journey to redo the OCP at a level fundamentally different than what has been done in the past and what Director Commence was talking about. We are having to look at the municipality in a way that is different than previous OCPs. We need to understand as the output question that needs to be answered through this process is, how are we going to meet 20 years worth of land supply? By the end of 2025, Council, we need to ensure that we have 20 years of land supply pre-zoned. So those zones are going to need to be created at the same time. That's never had to been done during OCPs in the past, and it certainly wasn't done in Comox in the past. So in one sense, you are losing a significant level of control over development in the community. The way development happens right now, we see individual projects coming in, council being able to look at them at a micro level and say, you know, we like this project, but this is what we want changed. We don't like this project. We don't want it to move forward. That power is about to be lost to council. And the other power that you have right now is the ability to control the speed of growth of the community. By determining what projects move forward and which don't, you can determine how quickly Comox grows. It was only a couple of years ago when you were first elected, I think that what I mentioned to you is that the fundamental question you have to answer is how big you want Comox to be and how fast you want us to get there. And the province has answered that question for you. We don't have control over how fast Comox is going to grow. It will grow at the rate developers want it to grow at. Having said that, you have a significantly more detailed level of control over how the community is going to grow in the past, because going through this OCP, you're going to determine what the zoning is going to be and what the outcomes. The zoning is separate from the OCP, but it's going to be a process that feeds into each other. You are going to have the ability to determine what the zones and development looks like for the next 20 years by creating that pre-zone. And that's, you're going to be your more micro level ability to determine what the community looks like. What are the principles that are going into development in certain areas? What are the things you want included and what don't you? And that's going to start very soon. So we have the major development projects that are coming up, and we're taking a look at what the province is asking us to do, and we're trying to adapt prior to getting to 2025. And so what that means is we're looking at these template zones that are going to be used to go into the zoning in the future. And so you're going to look at that in the near future with Broad Street and High Street. So it's kind of a trade-off. You're giving up significant power over how quickly the community is going to grow, but at the same time, through this OCP and determining the zoning process, you're going to have a level of ability to shape the community that really wasn't seen in past OCPs either.
Councillor Kerr.
So understanding that, if let's say we said that Comox roads, rec centers, schools, marina, parks can't accommodate 100,000 more people, and 100,000 more people want to come here, and the developers want to build them that space, what control do we have? I mean, Comox is the best place to live in Canada, so of course everyone wants to come here. Are you telling me we have no ability as council to say, you know what, we could probably stretch from 15 to 25 in the next 10 years, but we can't go from 15 to 55?
Yeah, with caveats, no, you don't have any control over that anymore. If we were getting to the point where we could demonstrate to the provincial government that our water and sewer system simply can't handle it, they may grant us a reprieve and an extension to allow us to upgrade our pipes in order to be able to handle the flow. but that is one of the really, I see it, it's a little bit scary from a municipal planning point of view, and I'm sure it is from council as well. We have to zone for 20 years worth of development. It's happening everywhere. It's happening all across the province. So you would hope there's no gold rush mentality on one community or another. But what will start to happen is developers will start to take a look around the province and see where there still remains a market premium. What municipalities remain a market premium to construct. And you could see there's nothing stopping 20 years of development, of land development being built in 5. It's market conditions. And no, council, you won't have the ability to stop it unless our infrastructure, and the infrastructure won't be roads, by the way. It won't be your roads are too busy, your intersections are failing. It will not be parking. The province has been pretty clear. I mean, we hear complaints about the lack of parking in Comox already. The province has been very clear that what is going to happen through this process is we will reduce our parking requirements from what we have already. And there will be parking issues in your community. And at some point, the parking will get so bad, people won't want to use their cars anymore. That's sort of the approach that's being taken. And again, council, you won't have the control over that either.
I think it's drive less, not have your cars taken away. All right, let's ask some pertinent questions on this. We still have 7 or 8 items, although this is the big one of the night. Councillor Grant.
Yeah, so I think that's why we have the next motion coming up about contributions from the government for some of those other infrastructure items. That's exactly what I was thinking about when I dreamed that one up. But I think that this is probably the biggest decision that we'll make on council for probably ever, or maybe not ever, but pretty close. And I think it's really important. I'm noticing a lot of apathy out there amongst the public. They kind of go, yeah, whatever, whatever, until something starts going on beside their house, and then they're going to be phoning us screaming, and we won't have anything to do with it. So we won't be able to do anything about it. So I'm encouraging everybody I see to come out to these meetings and have their say, because I think those that show up are really going to form this plan. And I think that we need to have a really robust group come out. I mean, I've seen the last time we did one, and it was basically the same 25 people just went through the meeting. And, it wasn't really, it wasn't really a very good process, in my opinion. It was about 250 grand, but I think that, I think it's incumbent upon us to encourage people that we know to come out and have their say and say what they think. 20 years is a long time. When you start looking at an OCP and think that, we did one 10 years ago, and the first 5 years you don't have hardly any changes, and then it starts, and then suddenly the changes all start coming about 10 years. Well, this is a 20-year plan. So I can see a lot of things changing over the next 20 years. If you think back 20 years to what you had compared to what you have today, it's completely different. So this is a big ask from the province, and I really quite like the way it's laid out. I think it's probably as it should be for now, but I think that those that show up to the meetings are really going to form the process. So I think we need lots of people.
Thanks for those comments, Councillor Grant. So we've had some good discussion on this. It looks like we're doing a little bit of blind trust that things work out as we're being told as recommended based on kind of the foundational document that we have all the other reference documents to rely on. So there is not a motion on the table. I don't believe there might be. Okay. So there is a motion on the table that our council endorse the proposed budget of $315,000, including $60,000 allocated to community engagement for an RFP to go out in the very near future. We've had discussion. Any last questions or comments before we vote on that?
So did council want to include the recommendation that staff review the list of supporting documents to be reviewed and included in the OCP council or the OCP?
Yes, so I believe accessibility audit was not on that list, and any other appropriate documents. That would be great. Can Councillor Grant amend his own motion?
No, just if somebody wants to put forward an amendment, as I said, that staff review the list of plans to be included in OCP review.
Councillor Councillor Kerr has put his hand up for that amending motion. And a seconder, okay, that amending motion. So we're going to vote on adding the amended motion. So not on the motion itself, but on the addition of the amendment for an updated list of reference documents, for example, the accessibility audit. All those in favor of the amended motion being added? And that passes. And now we have the motion as amended. Any questions or comments on the amended motion? All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. So that will go out for RFP with a review of the list of reference documents. So we're now on G. We have the motion from Councillor Grant on increased funding to support capital expansions of municipal service infrastructure. And we're looking at this going forward as a motion, not as a motion, but as an item at AVICC and UBCM in 2024 to the province. Thank you, Councillor Grant, moving his motion, and a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Kerr, thank you. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor?
Sorry, is it about creating a municipal housing authority?
No, this
Okay,
is
phew.
for AVICC and UBCM to have increased infrastructure based on us not being able to fund out of property taxes alone. I could read it. It's number G in the agenda on page. We're on G. Okay, it's Councillor Grant's motion for increased infrastructure funding. Top of the page, agenda, page 5. G. It's possible. Just give me one moment. But I'm going to. Thought our agenda online was amended, but it may not be. I've got it. It's great. No, I've got it up. Okay. Back to page 5G, which is the correct motion there. Any questions or comments? It's already on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for the confusion.
Would you like me to go to these conventions and present it, or are you going to do that?
We'll figure it out when the time comes. Yeah, we'll get there. We can share in those duties. We have H, we have lunch with MLA Ronald Ray Leonard, which is happening in 5 days on Monday. And we typically bring 3 council priorities that we would like to see advocacy for with the provincial government. We have no kind of supporting document tonight, but in past, there's been a couple of key topics that we've kind of brought up. So I'll just read off a couple, and if we can kind of have an idea in advance of what we want to talk with her about, that's helpful. So we've had increase in infrastructure funding from the government, including looking at the property transfer grant or some other proportion of funding coming back to the municipality is one item. We've had where funding for treatment beds is going to come into play, as that's one of the social challenges and issues that we're seeing here in the Valley and across the communities. We've had just general housing, so social, non-market affordable housing funding. And lastly, we've had access to healthcare as far as doctors and health, mental health. So that's four things that have come up before. The new this year was kind of shelter space in the winter as a possible 5th. So I'll go out for comment, and if we can kind of get 3 themes to send over to them, that would be helpful. Councillor Grant.
Well, I think land use seems to be the flavor of the day these days, and I know that the province has not put affordable housing in on our DCCs or our ACCs, DCs, or whatever they're. But anyway, they haven't put it in, and so that leads me to believe that the province is probably looking at taking over the affordable housing issues, but we don't know that. And it would be really good to get some clarity from the provincial government as to how that's going to roll, because it's going to really, like Will's got a motion coming up about housing authority, well, that will completely affect that, depending on what the answer to that question is. And I know that Courtney hasn't really put their mind to this yet. They don't really know what the government is doing, so nobody seems to really know the outcome, but I know that we're not going to be able to charge for it. So I think we should get clarity from her on that.
Okay, so affordable housing seems to be coming up quite often. We'll write that down. That might be something we can have you speak about on Monday if you're coming. Okay, we'll speak to that. And it will specifically mention on the affordable, I don't know how to say it, contribution policy, that they haven't addressed that. So that can be our very specific question, which makes sense, timely. Other comments around kind of treatment beds, mental health, or other? Councillor Kerr.
Well, I think maybe even Councillor Grant's like motion in item G that we just talked about, like giving her a heads up, like that's something we're gonna bring to AVICC and UBCM and talking around that, again, that infrastructure piece. It kind of goes with the housing a little bit, but I think it's separate enough that give her a heads up that we voted on that and
Yeah, MG can just be its own, just exactly as it reads. I can put that forward. So that's two possible items we've talked about. Councillor Mayer.
Sorry, did we want to bring up the situation table funding and see if she had some ideas like for continuing, ensuring that the province is going to continue funding that collaborative approach?
I would favor kind of having treatment bed funding situated, because I think that's the bigger picture, but then it could also be a secondary, or not a secondary, but part of that conversation, but same.
Yeah, I agree.
Same question on what they're really looking at doing differently. Councillor Swift, did you hear that? No. Sorry. So we have three possible ones so far, so we can either leave it at that, but I'll just quickly read them off. So we have the infrastructure funding, which was the previous motion, and we'll read that as Councillor Grant proposed in item G. We have the affordable housing and how the province is going to be looking at, are they taking it over, or we have no way through our contribution policy potentially to take from that on new developments. So what their plan is for their affordable housing contribution, or their plan to take over affordable housing in general. And then the third one will be for what is currently being looked at for treatment beds in smaller communities like ourselves. I know we didn't make the funding for the last round, and we can bring up the situation table funding, which is only good for 12 months at the moment. Is that an okay kind of topic docket for the lunch? We only have about an hour and a half, so I'm sure that will be more than enough. Counts your CAO wall.
I just wanted to mention, I know the city of Courtney is looking to get support to lobby the provincial government to provide more funding for supportive housing in the city of Courtney, if that's something you wanted to consider talking about as well.
Just to clarify, supportive housing being like including like treatment beds, like substance use supportive housing?
Yeah, I think the desire from the city of Courtney is all ranges of services that are required to help there right now.
And probably a focus on treatment substance use. Councillor Mayer.
Sorry, I was just thinking back to some of our bigger issues at UBCM, and was reminded of the challenges that we have with our watershed. And just thinking this might be a good opportunity to bring that up again, make sure it's still on the top of her list, because it is so significant for our community.
That's a good one. They have asked for our top three, so we just have to decide if one other one's going to come off, or if we want to save it for, and I'm not saying that one, but save one of them for UBCM when we get the opportunity to meet. Councillor Blacklock.
We have an unfunded skills bike park in need of grant funding, and I think that should be on our top three, at least third, maybe second.
Thank you for bringing that back up. That is a good one. Okay, so we have watershed. We could just be cheeky and have 5.
Well, we might be able to nest. Can we do more nesting?
the treatment beds and supportive housing kind of goes together, like to support our regional unhoused
Yeah,
population?
we have that together now.
Yeah,
Yeah, but the affordable housing we've had out, we could always try to put those all into one.
yeah, maybe housing in general. And then I would support Councillor Blacklock's suggestion with Skills Park,
Okay.
pump track.
We'd also support that. How do we feel about having the watershed nested as a, well, not nested, but as a item to be brought up kind of?
Well, so yesterday at the RD, we had quite a presentation just on watershed protection, and they've been to the province, I think he said, for about 15 years in a row, and they keep getting the same answer, and nothing ever happens. And so it may be something that you can flip in. I know the RD is going to be working on that as well, so I think they're going to hear it anyway. But you know, it might be something you could throw in sort of quickly and say, don't forget that. But I think the answer is pretty clear after 15 years that they're not very interested.
Sat in on the meeting that the CVRD did with Ron Ray Leonard and David Eby, I believe it was, and they seem very interested in person, but I don't think there's been any recourse on that. So okay, we can probably get away with having those four things. So I'll send an email out before the meeting on Monday, and if there's, we'll figure out if there's, it'd be nice to have one or two other people kind of take an item, and we can just have the kind of unofficial conversation on Monday, and those conversations will continue at UBCM. I won't need a motion for that, I don't believe. So item I on page 171, Chair, he sent the letter and email as Chair, Will Cole Hamilton was looking for whether Comox would support ABICC resolutions that the City of Courtenay and CVRD were looking at the time. There are two there. One of them was the improved funding models for how we deal with the weather response shelters, as at this time all communities deal with it basically on their own timeline, their own budget, and then you apply for funding kind of if you have a solution. So they're looking for more of a provincial guideline and guidance and funding in advance, not just kind of one-off in every community. And then the other one was, as was alluded to earlier, was whether we would look at a housing authority, and there's a drafted motion there. I know that one's probably the more debatable item tonight. So I'll just go to the first one. Do we want to look at any support for having the province take a bigger role in the emergency weather response shelters as far as providing funding in advance for that? I would consider being supportive of that resolution for ABICC.
So that one also, these two both came up at the RD last night, and this particular one you're talking about was supported unanimously, and I think it's something that they really should be doing. I think it is really their bailiwick, and they should be doing it, and I think this is really good motion. So.
It put a lot of pressure on, I know, like around a table where we weren't used to dealing with that topic. Like it was something that was fully out of our wheelhouse at the time, and I would be supportive just based on how challenging it was to deal with from a local government perspective. But and they are looking for us to send a separate ABICC resolution and of course support it during the actual conference. So thanks for that comments on what happened last night on that. That's helpful. We would look for a motion, but is there other questions or comments? We're going to do these two separately. So the first one is doing an ABICC resolution on the emergency weather response shelters.
Okay, I would move that.
Moved.
Second.
Seconded. It still looked like there was maybe going to be some discussion around the table.
I was just going to say I fully support this. We were really, as a local government in Comox, Courtenay, and the regional district, kind of we were left scrambling, and it didn't work. Right? Mm-hmm. So, absolutely, it should come forward, and they need to be reminded that this should be a funded thing for emergency weather response.
Perfect. Yeah, we were looking where the money would come from at the very last minute. Okay, so all those in favor of that being an ABICC resolution from the town of Comox? Opposed? I'm going to do that one more time. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Wasn't sure if there's a time delay there. The second one is whether or not we would put forward a motion for funding in advance of a housing authority in the region, which some other regions are going the route of, some are not. Councillor I would say Councillor Kerr and then or Councillor Grant, if there's some update on the conversation last night, that would actually be quite helpful now also.
Yeah, so this one came up and again, this one seemingly passed unanimously, except he didn't ask for those that had a negative vote, which I did. So it didn't get recorded, but, you know, I look at this and I look at what we just talked about with affordable housing contributions. We don't know where they're coming from. We don't know. I think this is why it's important that we find out more from the government as to what they're doing before we jump into this. The second thing is, to me, this is just growing local government, and I've always thought that we should make it smaller, not bigger. And so this is growing it. The thought that they have is that you can run these and they'll be free. Well, that will not be the case. And in speaking with the staff, they all said, no, you're not going to get this for free. So, you know, I'm not really a big fan of housing authorities to begin with. So I really have a hard time with this motion, especially knowing that the funding or the ACCs and DCCs could really be in jeopardy for affordable housing. So I would vote no for this one.
Thanks for the update on how last night went. Councillor Kerr?
Yeah, and just taking a step back, I think it's just about both of these motions. I think what's really neat is whether one or both of them get approved. The point was, you know, really going to ABICC and UBCM with regional motions that we can support, you know, all four municipalities. So I think that's kind of exciting, and I think that's a neat thing that we're trying to do. Specifically on this one, you know, it's not just about a housing authority. I think that it uses that as an example. What it's really talking about is how to meet the need of non-market housing. And so again, the recent coffee date I had with the local developer, and we went through his numbers and all the math on the back of a notebook. And, you know, it doesn't make sense financially for a developer to, because of interest rate costs and various other factors, to build non-market housing. They can't make it work. They would lose money, especially when it comes into account the amount of the loan that they have to do and provide and show that they're going to have the rent revenue to pay the loan back, right? So then how, and we also know from the housing study that the biggest need we have in our community isn't actually the shelter, it's the non-market housing, which then allows everyone to move up into that area. So the community housing, non-market housing, co-op housing, subsidized housing, pick your term. So that's the biggest need for our community. So developers won't build it and can't. So who's going to build it? And so the entity, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a housing authority. The CVRD is doing lots of analysis as to what it might look like, but some kind of an entity that would be able to work with local nonprofits and developers that were interested with the right funding to find the land and resources to build this non-market housing and get people into housing that they can afford based on income. That would, if you did that, if you built enough of those right now in the community, it would almost solve the homelessness population, because, you know, people would go into the housing that fits them, and everyone would move up in the housing spectrum. So I do support this, obviously, if you can't tell by now. But I just want to say it's not about, you're not in favor of a housing authority. You're in favor of pressuring the local the provincial government to support local government and finding ways through whatever entity or through whatever funding process to build non-market housing. That's the point of this motion.
Councillor Grant.
Well, I don't disagree with a lot of what you said. I just don't know why local government would want to own this. And as I read this motion, it says right in there, the first topic area of dispute is the pursuit of grant funding to study housing authority formation, and the proposed wording is here. So they clearly are looking for a housing authority. And I don't think that our community wants to be in the housing business and owning houses. You can see where this can go in the future. And it's really great when there's a really low vacancy rate and no one can find a house. But 20 years from now, that vacancy rate could be 5%, where you couldn't rent these things to anybody, and we'd be owning them and we'd be stuck with them. And so I think this is probably a good motion, other than the fact that they're going after the housing authority. I just don't think we want to be in the housing business with it, because it's going to get really expensive for us.
Councillor Kerr.
I'm enjoying this so much. And one of the great things about being on the CVRD with Councillor Grant and Director Grant there is we do bring a diverse perspective from Comox. So I think that's helpful around the table, and probably amuses our fellow directors around the table as well. I think the good points. I think, you know, the underlying component of this is possibly going to a housing authority, but it's not the only solution. I do think, though, that, you know, when we look at this, we got to remember the town of Comox is in the housing business. We own 6 units. We partner with a nonprofit to rent them out at a subsidized rate to individuals and families. So if let's say municipalities aren't in this business, and provinces certainly aren't right now, then who will build this on-market housing? That's the need. Developers said they can't afford it. Province isn't doing it. So who's going to do it? Are we going to step up? That's the question.
Thanks for those comments. And before I'll read off the motion when we get there, I'll go to Councillor Blacklock, but we also don't have to send its proposed wording. We can have our own version of it, depending on where we get. So we don't have to use the wording based on here.
Yeah, well, I
Councillor
mean, if
Blackwell.
that's the intent, I think the Will Cole Hamilton should change his resolution, or we should write our own that specifically excludes the word municipal housing authority, because in any space where these have been tried, and Whistler comes to mind, they've been created to address a lack of affordable housing for people who work in their resort type towns. And we have that same problem here in the valley. Sure, we have tons of service jobs that pay wages that no longer support market rents. Big issue. So is the Comox Valley Housing Authority going to own units and rent them out at below market rates and manage all that? There is no way that that's the most efficient way to get people in homes. The people who will build these buildings need to be incentivized, in the nonprofit sector are the ones to build them. If you want to build nonprofit housing, then come from the nonprofit sector to build it. We can't have, the town of Comox does not need to be shareholders in a municipally held corporation. I'd be looking for more from BC Housing. The resolution should be addressed around BC Housing to build these buildings, as opposed to creating a municipal corporation that would then be staffed and have to be run, and it would create, in my mind, a path which I don't think we want to go down.
Thanks for the comment. So just again, for clarification, these are for AVICC. They're due in February 8th. We do have the opportunity to finalize any at one more council meeting in 2 weeks. I'll read off the wording. I don't believe we've had a motion, and I apologize if we have.
If we did want to make our own motion, though, we could forget AVICC and go just to UBCN too. So
It can also just go to UBCN. That's right. But the current request is for AVICC, and we do have one more meeting. And I just wanted to say we've had the 2 pass so far. We have infrastructure, and now we have the EWR emergency weather shelters. Can I be reminded if that motion's on the table? Thank you. CAO, comment?
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit of clarification. So Council, you passed the first motion that you generated at your strategic planning meeting, which will be sent to AVICC for inclusion in what they're debating. What you have in front of you right now is simply whether or not Council wants to support a motion from another organization that's going, at the end of the day, totally okay to do that, but you are all going to go down to AVICC as individual delegates. You guys are going to make your vote however you feel personally while you're there. You're not going to vote as a block for the town of Comox. So you don't need to come to agreement on whether or not you want to support this motion or a changed motion. Again, I don't want to stop you from going down that path if you want to, but just remember, when you go down to AVICC, whatever was decided at the council meeting tonight, it isn't going to matter for what you do when you're at AVICC or when you're at UBCM as your own delegate.
Yes and no, but my understanding is Chair Cole Hamilton was actually looking for whether Comox as a community supported those 2 in entirety also. So what we bring down ourselves is separate, but he wanted some feedback on what our community thought. So I think a motion of supporting in general or not supporting is helpful from how I read the letter anyway. They did want to.
Correct. That's the request that's coming to you, and I'm just saying that you can honor that request. You get a lot of requests. You get a lot of letters coming in. Will you support this from UBCM? Will you support this going to ABICC? I'm just saying, just reminding you, you can send a letter of request. You can not. It doesn't bar you from any decisions that you're making in the future.
And there's the two. It's whether we would support them, and then also do we send our own. So there's the two decision points. It sounded like the EWR was pretty positive. So we're still on the non-market housing / housing authority. Councillor Swift.
Thank you. I can understand the desire to go forward as a united group, but I just can't support this. I just think it's the really wrong place for us to go. I think the province should be taking these things on. We don't want to start with a big administration issue in our community. It just grows our government into a whole other area of downsizing that we're always complaining about, and I'm not sure why we would volunteer to take it on. Having said that, I understand the need for housing. There's a huge need for housing and a huge need for affordable and non-market housing. And I think we should be advocating with the province for that.
Thanks for those comments, Councillor Grant.
Yeah, and the way that the province is sort of tiptoeing around this ACCs and DCCs issue makes me think that they're going to, or they may be going to take over this kind of file and start getting into this area, which they should be in anyway. But I think that's why it's important that when we go to lunch with the MLA, that we really bring this up and try and get some answers from her on what the heck their plan is for this. Because it changes everything completely if they decide they're going to step in and start doing this.
They're doing things a little bit differently and a lot of changes, so it's good to know what their future plans specifically on that file would be. So we don't have a motion on the floor. I'm not sure that we're going to have a motion come forward on this one, but it is open if anyone would like to. Councillor Kirk.
So we actually, I know in the package, we kind of got here's what it might look like, but I don't think you saw the actual wording that we voted on last night. Would it be helpful?
The wording is in here, kind of in like a 3-paragraph, or it's proposed. I don't know if it got changed between when this letter was sent and last night. I don't know if it got changed.
Let me compare them.
The wording is on page 171 of the agenda. And it's 3.
Looks pretty close. I wonder, what if in the second paragraph, if we just took out the 4 words such as housing authorities? Would that change people's opinion on this? If we didn't mention it, we just talk about create something to make more housing, like more of a general...
I would say based on it being a ABICC resolution or just general inquiry of our support, I would make the motion. We can vote on it.
Well, I think that this is not our motion again. This was actually already voted on, and this is actually going to go. So I don't think we're in a position to make a change to it.
I think initially too, this was supposed to be on the agenda a week prior, so this would be more if we want to make the motion.
I'll make the motion that we support it then, just for discussion and vote.
Sure, and it's as is, sorry, to clarify?
As is.
As is, okay. A seconder? Seconded. I believe we've already had kind of discussion, but any other further questions or comments on the motion to support? Councillor Haslett.
Sorry, I'm on the technical difficulty side of things. I don't think that the town should be in a municipal housing authority. I agree with a few of my other councillors on that. It can get really dicey when you start to own buildings that are a fair bit older, as well as in the event that we're part of a bigger housing authority, what's best for Comox may not be best with the rest of the group. And I think the votes would come into play with that, especially if it was a CBRD level. So it's probably best that we stay out of this, and I'll vote against.
Thanks for those comments. I am also going to vote against. I think there's some more clarifications that I would like to see from the province on what their future plans are before I think it's been done inadequately for the last 15 or so years, but I would really hope that they may be able to actually become more effective in this area with some of the funding they're going to be getting from development. So not quite there on a yes, but I obviously think the need is massive in our community and many others. So all those in favor of supporting the motion? And opposed? Okay, and that is defeated, but of course we know that that went last night through to AVICC from the CVRD as a collective. And we will have one more opportunity at our next meeting if there's any AVICC resolutions by the February 8th deadline, so just keep that deadline in mind. We've got 4 more items under correspondence, most of them being either in-kind or financial requests. So the first one we're looking at on page 173 is from the CV Ukrainian Cultural Society.
I will move that as a motion in there, or receive the letter and grant them the request.
Would be correct. Is there anything from staff we should know about as far as the impact to revenues or usage of the buildings or anything like that?
No, what we will do moving forward is try and encourage them to use the sale buildings. We've had a number of cancellations of use in the community center, and it's just such a busy building right now. So council, you've already provided us direction to provide this, but not in a way that impacts programming. And there's just such demand at the community center now. We'll set them up at the sale building. So there may be a little bit less flexibility and access for them than there's been in the past, but we'll continue to provide the space when we have it.
Okay, thank you. And I think that would make sense as far as the need for our rec center. Okay, any other questions or comments? Was the motion to receive and grant seconded? Second, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously, thank you. Now we're on to the correspondence, page 174 from Lisa Dennis of the CVRD, bylaw number 795 for the Comox Valley Sports Track and Field Service. And it is, the item is that Town of Comox consent to the adoption of the CVRD District Bylaw number 654, bylaw number 795, being Comox Valley Sports Track and Field Service Conversion Bylaw number 2353-2001, amendment number 2 under section 346 of the Local Government Act. And this pertains to the turf field that is being looked at. They are looking for approval from the 2 municipalities and area A, B, and C to not go out to an AAP from my understanding. So we will get a motion so that we can have discussion.
One motion, or did you want me to give a little?
If you have more information, that would be great, Councillor Grant.
Okay, so
Sure.
so this has come up a couple times at the RD. It's a 6-5 vote every time. It just depends on one of the rural directors is off and then is on and then is off. So it's really contentious, actually, is what it is. The problem that I have with it is that we don't know where our budgets are going this year. We don't actually know what the increases are going to be. And this is another big piece to add on the top. If we actually knew what our budget was going to be, it would make this a lot easier, but we don't. So if we don't pass this soon, it will actually get pushed off till next year. But I think next year we could see, I'm not saying we will, but I think we could see some real differences in the way our budget works next time, with lower inflation rates, lower interest rates. If some of this market housing starts to go, then our tax requisition will be much better next year, and it may be a better time to look at something like this. We did put about 800,000 aside from the Growing Communities Fund for this project, but it didn't go ahead. And part of the reason for the area directors they're the ones that are really struggling with this, is because they're going to get quite a big tax increase this year. And it's interesting to watch, because over the years I've watched them not really care about taxes forever. And all of a sudden it's going to hit them right in the face. And all of a sudden it's like, holy cow, we better actually start paying attention to taxes. So they're really on it now. And so this is a big issue for them. I know the soccer people out there are just crying for this new field, but for me, if we knew our taxes were going to come in between here and the RD at about 1 or 2%, it would be an easy call. But if they're going to come in at 8 to 10%, then it's a different call. And so since we don't know that, I think we should put this aside for this year until we actually know where we're going and get some clarity from the province as to what they're doing and how we're going to be moving forward. So that's my take on it anyway.
Thanks for the pre-information. Any other counselors want to give any pre-information on that turf field requisition? So it's to be fair, it is looking to be between 5.1 and 7 million, which is greatly larger than was anticipated. So that's the challenge we're facing now. Councillor Kirk.
Yeah, so hard to argue with much that Councillor Grant says. I think I'll just play the context out here. So the Rec Commission did a very lengthy strategic planning process. Decided that the three biggest needs over the next 10 years are another turf field, and it's not just for soccer, it's also for rugby and baseball. It's kind of a neat design to accommodate different sports. And the turf field, because we get so much rain, allows them to play all year round, those sports, as opposed to just in the summer months. And then there's the third hockey rink. With the growing population, a third hockey rink is going to be needed, and there's a site planned kind of right beside the two current ones over by Vanier. And then the third one, and this will be a little bit longer, probably closer to the 10-year mark, according to the strategic plan, is the pool upgrade. So either doubling the pool length or putting another pool beside it, expanding the change rooms, all that. So those are kind of the three. And lengthy discussion happened of where the turf field should go, and should it be in Comox or Courtenay. Lengthy discussion about which order those three should happen, and it was thought the turf field should be the first one, how to fund it, all of that. So the funding request is for $21 a household in Comox to start funding these projects: the turf field, the hockey rink, and the pool upgrade. So don't just think about the field, think about those three together, because the funding starts $21 more, and then that funds those over the coming years. Our job tonight is not to green light or red light the project. If we vote for this, it just puts it to the CVRD board to then decide during the budget process in March whether to go ahead with it or whether to kick it to the next year. So that's if we vote for it. If we vote against it, it puts it right back at square one, and the whole process has to start again with a new bylaw, etc. Process the next year. So we're not voting for it, we're voting for the board, the CVRD board, to decide whether or not to do it this year or next year, the year before, in the future. So don't think that you're like green lighting the project tonight if you vote for this. You're delegating that authority to the CVRD directors to do it at budget time. To me, it's not going to go this year. The CVRD board is going to say, and we've heard clearly from the two rural directors who have said they can't accept it this year because the water rate increases, so they're going to punt it to the following year. My suggestion is we vote for it tonight, say Comox, we approve it when the CVRD is ready to fund it, and let the CVRD board punt it to the future year, not us. So that's huge. If we vote against this, we'll be the first group, because Courtenay already approved it, we'll be the first group that votes against it, and it will look like that we have killed the project. So just ramifications there about user groups in the communities. Finally, we've also paused our pump track. So I worry a little bit about the messaging, about pausing this going forward. I think this would be a sign to families and youth in our community that we do want to support recreation facilities. And finally, my health argument is, yes, costs are going up, affordability crisis is here, taxes are going up, but that's when people need recreation facilities the most. And putting a sports field that people can access cheaply, soccer, baseball are low barrier sports. Lots of people play them in our community that actually can have many health benefits, social, physical, mental, etc. So I think even when costs are going up, kids still need a place to play. So that's why I support this going forward.
Thanks for those comments. And I just have a question. Was there any rationale for the shorter period of time for the funding on it from the CVRD? Like why the collection would be over 5 years versus over like 20 years for these recreation items? Was that discussed at the CVRD board as why to kind of time crunch the collection of fees?
My recollection is, it's to start the collection now because when the pool will be a bigger project and there'll have to be a bigger bump in taxes for that. So it's to start the process and pay for the turf field within that 5-year span, because with the rink and then if you do a 20-year boring for all of them, then it would just push off the cost down the line. That's my
Might get
understanding.
built 1.5
Yeah.
and not the last
Yeah.
kind of half the project. Okay. And Cumberland did opt out for clarification. But
Well, Cumberland doesn't get a vote on this because they're not part of that service.
okay. My
So it-
understanding was they did have a vote on it. And voted
Yeah,
to
it gets
not be
really
part of it, so-
complicated. They're part of the board, so when this comes to the larger board, they get a vote, but when it comes to this particular committee, they don't get a vote, so it's kind of weird, right? But, so my understanding on this is that there's 5 entities that all get a vote on this. So there's Comox, Courtney, and the 3 areas. 2 of the areas for sure are saying no. Now you need at least 3 of the 5 in order to make this work, right? So that's my understanding of how this works. Yeah, okay, maybe.
I called for clarification today, and it sounds like if you have 4 or 5, you can go forward without an AAP, which is an alternate approval process. If you have less than 4, and again, I don't have the writing on this, this is explanation from CVRD.
Yeah.
If you have 2 or 3, then you'd have to go to an alternate approval process, which could end up being a referendum or some form of public. But if they have 4 of the 5, which is looking like it's unknown, then they can go forward without an AAP. It would just be approved at the CVRD budget.
That's my thing.
And why would we not want it to go to an AAP?
Yeah, I'd love a referendum on it. It makes the decision a little
Well,
bit easier, but
The AAP is
I
a
guess
reverse
it doesn't-
referendum.
Well,
It
so, yeah, so the thing is that they want to get it into this budget, and so if you go to an AAP, it's going to take time, we'll miss the budget, right, is why, so that'll automatically put it onto next year, so that's why we get to it here.
so to be confusing, if you vote yes, it's not necessarily going to go through. And if you vote no, it's also not necessarily going to go through. They're trying to dictate the process that it goes through at this point. So it's an indication of where Comox is as a municipality.
It's very unlikely to go through, given the 2 rural directors' staunch stance against this project. The question is, do we want the headline to be Comox kills turf field? That's our vote tonight.
Well, I would argue that.
Comox kills $7 million.
Yes, Comox actually looks after people that can't afford their taxes, that would be more the headline, I would think.
Okay, we'll keep on topic and stay away from headlines for now. Okay.
Clarification, it's 5.7. The $7 million was one of the options.
Yeah, the 5.7.
5.7 was the chosen one. 800,000 of that has already been allocated.
Correct. And the club themselves had contributed 500 to 600,000. Councillor Swift.
If I'm reading this right, I think I'm going to support this, given that the last time was 2001. There hasn't been a change in that requisition since then. Is that correct? Yes. And it says the bylaw was created.
Yeah.
So things have changed, the community's changed and grown. And I think I will support it, and you can figure it out at the regional district level, what happens after that. You're welcome.
Councillor Mayor.
Yeah, I'm also in support of moving this to the CVRD for their decision. For me, it meets our strategic goals around supporting healthy communities. I really do believe in making sure that we have accessible recreation for folks who don't have a lot of funds to recreate. And I don't want to create a process that is more administratively heavy for the government as well. So my vote is yes.
Councillor Hazlitt.
So just to kind of clarify this in my head, if we vote no, and it goes through like that, then they have to redo the entire bylaw process, and it's going to cost more money, and it might end up being the same decision. And if we vote yes, and it still doesn't get passed at the regional level and gets pushed another year, they don't have to spend the money to get another or more bylaws and RFP. Is that correct?
Not exactly, because we don't know what the decision will be at the CVRD. So at this point, we're just sending an indication. But if we vote no, there is a chance that it does. Maybe staff can answer that because it was kind of. Can you repeat that question one more time, Councillor Haslett, and I'll let staff take that one.
So if we vote no, and the project dies, and the CBRD comes back again next year trying to do it, they have to run through the entire process again. But if we vote yes, and the project doesn't go forward, it just saves money for a decision that's just going to be made later down the line.
And that doesn't necessarily save money. It just allows the CVRD board to then pause it and say, oh, it's been approved by the municipalities to do when we're ready, but we're going to pause it for a year because we're not ready. The board doesn't have the funds for it. So it gets you up to the funding point, and then the CVRD board can then decide when to fund it, this year, next year, 5 years from now. But correct, if we vote it down, then the whole bylaw process has to go again. It would come back to us and the other municipalities, which doesn't really cost money except staff time, but it just would you have to redo the last 8 months of admin work to get back to this point.
Fair enough.
I guess I would look at that and go, but the admin work's already done, so it's really not that hard to do.
Councillor Blacklock.
No, I'm reading from the last point in the report now. If the commission decides to conduct an elector approval process to borrow funds over 10 years, then the construction of the project would be completed in the spring, summer of 2025. And as a result of cost escalation between 2024 and 2025, the project costs could increase by 7 to 15%. Or they could go down 7%. Like the certainty of a 7 to 15% cost escalation by 2025 is pretty speculative. But I am sort of thinking that the electorate should have a chance to kill the project if they want. And I will support it here at this table and see what the commission decides to do after this point. I think, that to me, and I thank you, Dr. Kerr, for laying it out so eloquently that I'm a rec guy. If you know me, I'm a sports guy. I love all recreation and all sports. And I think they're great for youth and seniors and everything. But I'm willing to support it at this table. But I want to just bring up the point that 2025 costs might be neutral to today's costs. We can't speculate.
Any other comments, questions? Feels like a bit of a luxury at 5.7 million, but when we look at the turf field, the swimming pool, the ice rink, everything is at bursting capacity now, and we're talking about growing populations over the next 4 or 5 years. So I think it may be the only way to get it built sooner than later, even though it is at quite a cost. So what we'll do is, if there's no other questions or comments, so this is to send to the CVRD the overall town of Comox approval of what they've sent so far, so that it goes to vote at the CVRD for budget, just to confirm. All those in.
I don't think it's been motioned, so I'll make the motion.
Okay, so the motion is as is. Okay, the motion has been on the table and seconded. Any final questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Just do that one more time. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Haslett, are you in favor or opposed? Sorry. Thumbs up. Okay, so in favor? Thank you. There might be a bit of a delay towards me. So that passes. Thank you. Thank you. And we have the letter from Pete Chambers, Comox BIA 2024 event collaboration on page 218, our second to last item. So they have sent a letter in regards to asking for funding allocation for the, I believe it's 3 events. There's the 3,500 for Summerfest, 5,900 for the Mayor tree lighting, and 2,200 for the Halloween parade. Can we get a reminder from staff on what, I know this last year we provided for those events as a first time. What was the total that we gave in 2023? I think it was like 5,000 or 6,000.
I don't recall, sorry.
That's okay. I think we paid for 2 or so of those 3 events. So it is a funding request with that 95, sorry. Any feedback, questions on the BIA's request for extra funding for those 3 events as they get more into the education and business seminars, et cetera, with their current funding? CAO Wall.
Thank you. The 50% that Mayor Minion so graciously offered to staff earlier, I think is what could be well used now, Council, without having to go out and seek additional tax revenue. You have $67,500 of funds to allocate how you best see fit. The way I read this is basically a permanent turnover of the cost for these events to the town. And so what we're looking at on that 67,500 is permanent revenue increases, so those can match. And it's just a simple subtraction out of the 67,000 from whatever you approve here, plus the other funding requests you have in front of you. I do want to highlight that we will have a Nautical Days report coming to you in early February, and I would suggest setting aside $10,000 for Nautical Days is probably a good idea as well.
Thank you for that. And I'm not sure if, is there any specific, it looks like it's like 11,400, but I'm doing the math at this hour at night, 11,600, thank you. Okay, so that's the number that we're looking at, 11,600. Councillor Mayer and then Councillor Grant, please.
Yeah, my only question, I'm in support of it. My only question is really about if there are grants available to support events like this in the future. Just looking forward, it's becoming like an annual expense, and I'm just wondering if it's something we can get grant funding for.
Thank you for that. And yeah, over to staff if we would possibly look at when we communicate this to Lara or to with the BIA, if we would ask if they've also considered grants, just as far as I think last year was the first year they asked for event funding and we granted it, and now it's kind of the full 3 events.
There's definitely grants available for different events. Whether or not these are going to qualify and be approved is a different question. Some of the larger festival grants that are out there that you would see from the province, these are probably too small in scale to be approved, but there are smaller business-based grants. There are sometimes smaller grants that come out from the province. So there are grants out there, but whether or not these would get approved for them is the question, and how much they may get is another.
Thank you for that, Councillor Grant.
So I think the BIA is up for renewal fairly quickly, are they not? And so the way that works, it's done by a tax requisition. And so my question is, so they go out and tax for their own area. It's not really, we're just a flow through for the money more than anything. And so if we give them this money, it will become permanent, because this is how this seems to work these days. I'm just wondering if they couldn't go out and increase their tax requisition to cover this rather than us. Like, they can't do it for this year, so I get that. But in future years, can't they just increase their tax requisition and pay for this? So I'm a little bit nervous that we take this on and all of a sudden it's ours forever, when it really shouldn't be.
Yeah, I wonder if we could look at it as a 1 year and have the conversation. I think I'm set to meet with the BIA in the next month sometime, and look at if we find out when they're late. I think it's a 5-year rolling amount that gets charged out to just the downtown area. So that could be part of, I don't think there's a motion on the floor. It could be part of the motion on the floor that it looks into if that would be possible, depending on when that date is. It might be 2 years out. I'm not exactly sure when the renewal is. It's 1 year from now. Okay. So we'll go around the table and then we can go back for a motion that, depending on support for that. Councillor Swift?
Well, I'm going to support this because I think this is something that is provided to the whole town. When you look at the Halloween parade, that the kids come down to the downtown area, and it's not just the kids in the local area; it's from the whole town. Similarly, the tree lighting and what was the other one? The winter market. But anyways, Summerfest, we'll see what that looks like. But I think it's good to have these events and good to draw people into the town. So I would support it, even if it was ongoing.
Thanks for those comments. And just watching the events over the last 5 years, they've gotten busier and busier and probably doubled or tripled since the first year. So they seem to be something the community is really enjoying as far as downtown vibrancy. Councillor Kerr and then Councillor Mayor.
Just again, thinking about this in terms of our nautical days discussion coming up, looking at the expenses, 6,600 is for the coordinator role. So that lead person position to run the 3 events. Not to preempt the nautical days discussion, but we're looking at different models for nautical days going forward, including would that be a staff person, like a recreation staff person, to do some of the events, including nautical days? Would this discussion and decision maybe be best had in conjunction with the nautical days discussion, and then we could decide if a recreation person was doing nautical days, these 3 events, other town events like the music in the park, that might make more sense and maybe be easier to fund that way rather than a different way. Thanks.
That's definitely something council can consider, yes.
Yeah, just looking, we have about 5 months until the first event, so it's probably something they want feedback on pretty quickly, but potentially a bit of time, another month.
I
Councillor
make a
Grant.
decision today when we can put it off for another meeting.
I'd prefer to make the decision
But, you know-
today and look at future years.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't really have a big problem with paying for this or helping them pay for it. I just think that groups should be coming to our table, and if they need money for a year or 2, that's fine, but they should always be looking for a way to get out of the grant situation and into doing it themselves. And it seems more and more, and we heard it a couple times tonight, they want money and it's considered permanent and we just keep paying. And so, for me, I think there might be another way for them. I have no problem giving them money for this year and then seeing if we can work with them to get a different way to fund this. But I don't have any problem with it if we have to pay for it. But it's just I'd like these groups to start thinking about it differently than the way we did.
Yeah, it's fair enough. Otherwise, we won't be able to sustain all the different funding requests. Councillor Blacklock.
Well, I think the message here,
Sorry, Councillor Blacklock. Councillor Mayor was waiting before
sorry,
Grant, and I
Councillor Mayor,
apologize.
go ahead.
No, sorry, I had my hand up actually before you spoke. It's fine.
But it was my turn this week.
Oh, and I didn't get that we were going around. That's fine. We're going around. Here we go. The reason I had my hand up was actually I don't think it's about the grants that is niggling for me. It is about this bigger question of how are we supporting this kind of community building in a more sustainable kind of way. So I'm actually really in favor of having the kind of conversation that Councillor Kerr was mentioning, where we're looking at these events are so important for community health and wellness and for economic vibrancy, and they have lots and lots of benefits. So I'm more curious about ways for us to integrate it into our kind of business model. I think that the need is actually growing and only going to grow as our population grows. There are other communities, I think I brought this up before, there's placemaking roles where you have staff who look at ways to create spaces throughout the community for people to gather. And that's something that's really been lost. It's like part of the loneliness epidemic that we're dealing with that has all kinds of costs socially. So less concerned, like I'm happy to approve this tonight, and I'd really like to have that broader conversation about how we support this in a more sustainable way as part of our business model.
Thank you for those comments, and I apologize for skipping your turn there. Councillor Blacklock.
No, as you at this table know, that BIA has undertaken their own strategic planning process, and they've come up with their own kind of vision for the future of their organization. BIA runs on a tax requisition of the downtown business members that nets them about $75,000 a year. And from that, in the past years, they've spent a good portion of that money running these types of events. And they're looking as an organization to get out of the event business, to be honest. They spend way too much of their board time and their working board time and their ED time worrying about these 3 events all year, when their true role should be advocating for the businesses that they serve. So this is part of that evolution, and I think we're on to the right track as far as coordinating all our town events under one umbrella. I think that's something we should definitely be looking at. But I know that without our support here tonight, these events will die. So we like the events. We've said we like the events. They certainly, as mentioned here, growing in popularity. So I would speak, of course, in favor of supporting these events and again, working towards a different way of setting this up so we're not back here in the same position 12 months from now.
Okay, kind of hearing everyone's comments, I would put a motion that we pass the 11.6 that's been proposed with the intent of it being this year. And then the BIA reached out for kind of an annual meeting. Of course, you're the liaison. So with that feedback, myself and Councillor Blacklock could have sit down with them and have that discussion on what that could look like as far as an option of a tax requisition, not saying that passed at our table, but just open that conversation up with them. So it'd basically be approval of the 11.6 for this year to make sure that these events are good for the next 12 months, and just a general discussion from the liaison and myself with the BIA on what that could look like as a tax requisition as one option. The seconder. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Kerr.
Just last piece, then with the Nautical Days report coming, maybe even broadening it to events like Nautical Days, Music in the Park, and these 3 events, like really looking together as a way to take those on. Have the BIA maybe divest them and us take them on, and then would that support the role of a rec coordinator position?
And I think we can, if it's possible to do with that secondary, like either at the time of the conversation, we could have that discussion with them, but I think we should have that discussion first before we ask them to divest, like if we keep those separate. So to hold on to that thought until the next conversation about Nautical Days, if that makes sense, and kind of get this kind of separate, if that works. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? And opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you for the discussion on that. And our last item for the evening is the request and correspondence from Sid Williams Theatre. And that is, they are looking for the $30,000 for 2024, but they are looking for $5,000 a year incremental increase to reach $50,000 in 2028. So that's relatively substantial as far as a change. I don't have the history of what we've been paying, but from recollection, I believe 30,000 was the last year and 25,000 before that. 25, not 30 last year. Okay.
25 last year, and this year would be the first 5. They're requesting this year be the first step in increasing it by 5,000 to pay 30,000 this year.
I do, in our last term, we have gone up by 5 or 10 at some, there was one point where we bumped up, but not in this systematic kind of approach. And there is no other detail on other municipalities on this either. So it's kind of a request to us only to make that decision. CEO Wall?
I was just going to mention, Council, you have a number of different funding requests. You have this, you've got nautical days coming up. Would it be useful to consolidate them all and just have a discussion with them at one time about which ones you want to fund, or do you want to take a look at these on a one-off basis? And I just say that in consideration, you have the 67,000. If you go above that, you'll have to find additional revenue.
Councillor Grant loves punting things.
Well, yeah, so let's put this off, yeah, because that's what we do. But no, I think that's a good idea, because it really shows council too, how many of these things we get and how much we have to fund and what the true cost of them actually turns out to be. Like, I look at this, and this brings back my thoughts on the marina a little bit, where, here's the other communities coming to us asking for money. But we don't go out and say, hey, we've got Filbert Lodge out here, we've got a marina, can you give us some money to help us? So, I think it's a good discussion for us to have, but I would really like to see them all come together so we can figure out what we've got and where it has to go.
Yeah, and
that's what we don't have right now.
They have a July 1st kind of year end or starting of the year, so we have a little bit of time, and it says that we're not paying as much as City of Courtenay and CVR Regional District, but that would make sense with our population size. So just a little more clarity on what's happening with the population.
So if we just receive this letter, will you just put that report together for us then in the budget, or do we have to make a motion?
If you receive this letter in the next meeting, we will bring a report that details the funding request that we've received.
Okay, so then I'll move receipt.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on just receiving? And we will bring this up at a future budget meeting to look at with other funding requests. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. I thought you meant we had more funding requests tonight. I was like, on what page is that? Okay, so we have no late items. Any reports from members of council? And this would just be on items of not of attendance, but of kind of update or education from board meetings, et cetera, that you attended. We'll go quickly around the room, starting with Councillor Blacklock, if you have any items.
Well, the only event of significance, I'd just like to give kudos to Dr. Kerr. He presented to the Social Planning Society at the beginning of the month, and I was in attendance in the room. He presented via Zoom and did a great job presenting, the ways Comox is looking to move forward on non-market housing, and we've talked about that at this table around a few sites that the town can be involved with going forward. So that was the only event of significance for me.
Thank you for giving kudos to fellow Councillor Kerr, and thank you for doing that. The report was well prepared by staff and Councillor Kerr. Councillor Swift.
I have nothing to report except a reminder, if you haven't already got your membership to the Filbert, please do so.
Thank you. We'll go online to Councillor Haslett.
Nothing to report, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett. We'll have Councillor Kerr, Councillor Grant, Councillor Mayor.
Well, thanks, Councillor Blacklock, for mentioning that. The Social Planning Society meeting, great discussion. I also attended the Coalition to End Homelessness meeting. Lots of discussion with the emergency shelter. The Courtenay councillors keep hinting at some important announcement coming at some point, and they've been doing it publicly, so I'll mention it now. So we're hoping BC Housing has a big announcement, so stay tuned to the news. I have my fingers crossed. I attended a meeting of the Backroad Citizens Group talking about road safety, and they're planning to make a delegation to our council soon about some of their concerns. And I met with a group of Comox Marina boaters, as I referenced earlier in this meeting. From the CVRD, and Councillor Grant may want to expand on this, but we had a discussion about the tax rate. And initially it's looking about like an increase of about $69 per year per household in Comox, or about $575 per month. So again, that's per year. Per month per year. Yeah. So I think 69 per year, 575 per month. So I think the that's going to be discussed and puts in the context some of the other conversations we had tonight. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Grant.
I don't have much to say. I think I said most of it during the meeting because we touched on a lot of the topics we were dealing with, so I'll just pass it on.
Thank you very much.
I just attended a food policy council a subcommittee meeting today, and the other thing that I can think worth mentioning is just kudos to the emergency management, our regional emergency management service for all of their work. Providing the warming centers, I should say, because there was a number throughout the region that they're responsible for, and everything I heard about them was really exemplary. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I just have two very quick updates. The first, I just want to give a large kudos and thank you to staff who handled the automated garbage transition with a lot of grace. And I know from the very few days I was in the office over the holidays, there was people coming in giving some feedback, solutions, criticisms. There was a lot of different communication portals, from social media to the online feedback to people walking in. So a huge thank you to staff who really were on the front line of that change. It's greatly appreciated for how that was handled. And the second one was, of course, we had some freezing cold temperatures and snow removal operating at pretty much the same time. So not the best timing, but I think our Town of Comox Public Works and Administration Communications, all the departments handled that just fantastically. So thank you so much for that. And the second quick announcement is we have a Team GoMox for the coldest night of the year, which is happening a month today on February 24th. Town of Comox welcomes all councillors, community. We're partnered with the fire department, so thank you to Chief Schreiner for that. Back to a couple years ago, we're going to have a tent at the Comox Fire Department, so welcoming everyone to go for a hot chocolate before and after, and have our own Comox walk. Again, thank you to the fire department. Our team out of 59 teams at the moment is sitting third right now. And again, huge kudos to the fire department for their involvement there. That is, again, a month tonight at 4:30. It's a kind of a fun team building event. It's go there for, an hour and a half. And we hope to raise $5,000 for Dawn to Dawn and the Comox Valley Transition Society. So that's Team GoMox. And again, thank you to the fire department for having a Comox version of the walk. It makes it really doable on that Saturday to just get out, walk together, and then make it home for your regular Saturday activity. So thank you for participating in that. And with further ado, we have no media questions. Any questions from the public? Mel, you're welcome to come up to the mic. If you can just use the mic for Councillor Haslett and anyone. Thank you, Mel.
Speaking to the edict that came down from the Central Planning Committee, Bill 44, and the amenities that if they're putting out they're going to supply the blueprints, I believe, for everything. Well, I'm wondering if it includes the inside of the building. I'm thinking of accessibility for people in wheelchairs and seniors that are not getting, in the build. If they're brand new buildings, could the outlets for the electricity and the switches be made accessible by people in wheelchairs? So the switches are higher up, and the outlets and the switches are lower. Otherwise, is it up to the municipalities to ask them to do that? It would cost them nothing, really. And we can go on to other accessibility things like putting plywood in the bathroom so they can put grab bars anywhere it's needed. Just, anyway, staff might know, I don't know. That's my question. And it's nothing to do with traffic.
So in regards to Bill 44, I think it's mostly on the external building, but there is some accessibility tightening of some of the bylaws upcoming, but I don't think it's related to
I'll
over to staff.
yeah,
If they
Director.
have an answer, otherwise we'll get back to you with possible feedback.
The province has been very clear that BC Building Code regulates construction. The ACCs would be for.
Do you mind using your mic, Marvin? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
The ACCs would be for community facilities, community facilities. So for example, like a rec center expansion, and then you could, depending on, you have to design the budget and then recover the costs and allocate it according to existing residents versus new residents. You're only allowed to charge the ACC on the new residents. General housing? No. That would be under the BC Building Code. So it's odd, yeah, then anything with BC Building Code, they're automatically required under BC Building Code to build it if it's required under BC Building Code. Yes, it's just, again, they're very specific at this point. They're saying that's regulated under the BC Building Code and directing us to focus on creation of additional units and meeting the supply of the 20-year.
I think what's being said is that we probably don't have the power to regulate what you're asking for. Yeah, the amenities, we don't have the ability to get amenities anymore. What we can do is get amenity cost contributions, which is just funds towards constructing new infrastructure. Things like expanded community centers, fire halls, and town halls. So the provinces take, the province is really taking away our ability to direct how housing is constructed. They're telling the municipalities to kind of stay out of that and focus on improving the housing coming in.
Write some letters to the provincial government. Thanks for the question. Okay, so I will move motion for adjournment at 8:56. Second, all those in favor? Thank you very much, and thanks for all staff in attendance.